The Italian Mafia king who became obsessed with the black janitor who cleaned his office. Part 2. Some people think peace is something you earn once and keep forever. Ruth Williams used to believe that too. 3 years of quiet. 3 years of Sunday dinners and burnt pancakes and a daughter who finally stopped flinching when a man raised his voice. 3 years of watching Benigno learn how to be soft in a world that had only taught him to be hard. She thought the worst was behind them. He was wrong. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Ruth was finishing her clinical rotation at Northwestern Memorial, walking through the third-floor corridor with a patient chart in one hand and a cold cup of coffee in the other. Her nursing scrubs were wrinkled from a 12-hour shift. Her locks were pulled back in a practical bun. The wedding ring on her left hand caught the harsh fluorescent light. Simple gold, tiny diamond, everything she never knew she wanted. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She almost didn't answer. Unknown number. Chicago area code. Probably spam. But something made her stop. Something made her press the green button and lift the phone to her ear. Hello. Is this Ruth Williams? The voice was unfamiliar. Male. Deep but not like Benigno's. Rougher around the edges with an accent she couldn't quite place. Italian maybe. Or something that used to be Italian and had been worn down by years of hiding. Who is this? Pause. Long enough for Ruth to hear the weight of what was coming. My name is Marco Onio. I'm Benigno's brother. Ruth stopped walking. The corridor continued around her. Nurses passing, machines beeping, the ordinary chaos of a hospital in motion. But she stood frozen, phone pressed to her ear, the world suddenly narrowing to this voice and these words. Benigno doesn't have a brother. He does. He just doesn't talk about me. Another pause. I left 9 years ago. I shouldn't have. And now someone is going to kill him because of what I did. Ruth's chest tightened. Her fingers gripped the phone harder. What are you talking about? There's a man named Dante Ferraro. He used to work for our family. When I left, I made a deal with him. Information for safe passage. I thought I was just walking away. I didn't realize I was giving him the leverage to destroy everything. Marco's voice cracked slightly. He's been waiting. Building power. And now that Benigno has stepped back, Dante sees his chance. His chance to do what? To take everything. And eliminate anyone who might challenge him. Ruth leaned against the corridor wall. Her legs felt unsteady. Through the window beside her, she could see the Chicago skyline stretching toward the horizon. Storm clouds gathered in the distance, dark and heavy. Why are you calling me? She asked. Why not call Benigno directly? Because he won't listen to me. I abandoned him. I left him to become what our father needed, and I disappeared into a new life while he carried the weight of the old one. Marco's voice was heavy with guilt. But I've been watching from a distance. I know about you. I know what you mean to him. I know you're the only person who's ever made him believe he could be something different. Ruth closed her eyes. Felt the truth of those words settle into her bones. I'm coming to Chicago, Marco continued. I need to warn him in person. I need to help fix what I broke. But I'm asking you, please. Prepare him. Tell him I'm coming. Tell him I know I don't deserve his forgiveness, but I'm going to try to earn it anyway. Silence stretched between them. Ruth thought about the life she'd built. The brownstone with the Sunday dinners. Nadia's rock collection on custom shelves. Benigno learning to make pancakes and failing spectacularly every time. She thought about how fragile it all was. How quickly it could shatter. Why should I trust you? She asked quietly. Marco's answer came without hesitation. You shouldn't. I haven't earned that yet. But you should trust that I love my brother enough to risk everything to save him. Even if he hates me for it. Ruth opened her eyes. Looked at the storm clouds building over the city. When do you arrive? 3 days. I'll talk to him. She ended the call before Marco could respond. Stood there in the hospital corridor, phone clutched in her hand, heart pounding against her ribs. 3 years of peace. Over with a single phone call. Ruth looked down at her wedding ring. The tiny diamond caught the light. A promise made. A promise kept. She didn't know what was coming. Didn't know if Marco was telling the truth or walking them into a trap. Didn't know if the life they'd built could survive what was about to hit it. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't going to run. Not this time. If you haven't watched part 1 of this story, You're going to want to go back and see how Ruth and Benigno's journey began. How a janitor with a mop and a Mafia king with blood on his hands found something neither of them expected. The link is in the description. Go watch it then come back. I'll be here when you're ready. And if you've already seen it, stay with me. Because this story is about to get a lot more dangerous. Ruth didn't tell Benigno that night. She came home from her shift at 7:30, bone-tired and carrying the weight of Marco's words like stones in her chest. The brownstone was warm, golden light spilling from the kitchen windows onto the front steps. She could hear laughter before she even opened the door. Inside, Benigno stood at the stove, a dish towel thrown over one shoulder, stirring something that smelled like garlic and tomatoes. His sleeves were rolled to his elbows, tattoos visible, the smooth dome of his head catching the overhead light. He'd gained a few pounds in the 3 years since he'd stepped back, contentment settling into his frame, softening the edges that used to cut. Nadia sat at the kitchen island, homework spread in front of her, but her attention was on Benigno. She was 15 now, taller, sharper, with her mother's stubborn jaw and a wit that could slice through steel. You're supposed to let it simmer, she was saying. That's what the recipe says. Recipes are suggestions. Benigno tasted the sauce, considered, added more salt. I've been cooking longer than you've been alive. And yet the pancakes are still terrible. The pancakes are character building. Ruth stood in the doorway watching them. Her husband and her daughter, bickering like they'd known each other forever. Like they were blood. This is what I'm protecting, she thought. This is what's at stake. Benigno looked up, saw her standing there. His face softened the way it always did when she walked into a room. You're late, he said. Long shift. Something like that. She crossed the kitchen, kissed Nadia on the forehead, then moved to Benigno's side. He wrapped one arm around her waist, pulled her close, pressed his lips to her temple. The gesture was automatic now. Comfortable. Earned. You okay? He murmured against her hair. You feel tense. Just tired. It wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the truth either. Ruth pulled away gently, started setting the table. Benigno watched her for a moment, that old stillness flickering behind his eyes, the instinct that had kept him alive for decades. But he didn't push. Dinner was normal. Nadia talked about school, about a project on the Great Migration her history teacher had assigned, about a boy named Deshawn who kept trying to sit next to her in chemistry. Deshawn, Benigno repeated flatly. It's not like that. What's it like? He's annoying. He smells like Axe body spray and bad decisions. Ruth choked on her water. Benigno's mouth twitched. I like her, he said to Ruth. She's got good instincts. She learned from the best, Nadia said, and Ruth couldn't tell if she meant her or Benigno. Maybe both. Maybe that was the point. After dinner, Nadia retreated to her room to finish homework. Ruth washed dishes while Benigno dried. They worked in comfortable silence, shoulders brushing, the rhythm of domesticity that had taken years to learn. When the last plate was put away, Ruth turned off the water, dried her hands slowly, stared at the dark window above the sink, her reflection staring back. Benigno. He heard it in her voice. The shift. The weight. He set down the dish towel. Turned to face her fully. His posture changed, not threatening, never threatening with her, but alert. Ready. What happened? Ruth turned around. Leaned against the counter. Met his eyes. I got a phone call today. At the hospital. She watched him process, calculate, prepare for a dozen different possibilities. This was the man he used to be. Always 3 steps ahead, always anticipating the next threat. From who? Ruth took a breath. Your brother. The silence that followed was unlike any silence she'd experienced in this kitchen. It wasn't empty. It was full, packed with 9 years of absence, of betrayal, of wounds that had never properly healed. Benigno's face didn't change. But something behind his eyes did. Something old and painful surfaced, then submerged again. Marco, he said. Not a question. A confirmation. Yes. He called you. Not me. He said you wouldn't listen to him. He thought I might. Benigno turned away. Walked to the window. Stood there with his back to her, hands braced on the counter, head bowed. What did he want? Ruth told him everything. Dante Ferraro. The deal Marco made 9 years ago. The leverage. The threats. The belief that someone was coming for Benigno now that he'd stepped back from the business. She told him about Marco's guilt, his fear, his plan to come to Chicago and warn Benigno in person. When she finished, the kitchen felt smaller. The warmth had drained from it, replaced by something colder, older. Benigno didn't move for a long moment. Then he turned around. His expression was carefully blank. But Ruth knew him well enough to see what lay beneath. The anger, the hurt, the complicated grief of a brother who had been abandoned. Marco doesn't call, he said quietly. He doesn't come back. He disappeared 9 years ago without a word. Changed his name. Built a new life. And now he wants to warn me. He's scared, Benigno. For you. He should be scared for himself. There was an edge in his voice now. He has no idea what he's walking into. Ruth crossed the kitchen. Stopped in front of him. Close enough to touch but not touching. Giving him space. What do you want to do? She asked. The question hung between them. Ruth watched him wrestle with it, the old instincts warring with the new ones. The man he used to be fighting the man he'd become. Dante Ferraro, he said slowly. I know that name. He worked for my father. Loyal. Patient. Ambitious. A muscle in his jaw tightened. I handed him control of the old operations when I stepped back. I thought he was the safest choice. Someone who understood the business but didn't have the appetite for more. You were wrong. I was wrong. Ruth reached out, took his hand, felt the tension in his fingers, the barely contained storm beneath his skin. Marco could be lying, she said carefully. He could be walking us into a trap. He could. But you don't think he is. Benigno was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Marco was always soft, kind in a way our world punished. He used to draw pictures when we were kids. Birds, flowers, things that didn't belong in our house. Our father called him weak. Beat it out of him. Or tried to. He swallowed. When he left, I hated him. For years, I hated him for escaping while I had to stay. But I also understood. He wasn't built for this. If he'd stayed, it would have destroyed him. And now he's coming back. Which means something scared him more than staying away. Benigno met her eyes. Marco doesn't take risks. If he's coming here, it's because he believes the threat is real. Ruth squeezed his hand. Then we need to hear him out. I'm not sitting this out, Benigno. Whatever's coming, we face it together. That was the deal. Something shifted in his expression. The hard lines softened. The storm quieted just slightly. I don't deserve you, he said quietly. We've established that. Ruth's voice was dry, but her eyes were warm. And yet here I am. He pulled her close. Wrapped his arms around her. Held her like she was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly become unstable. I'm scared, he admitted into her hair. Not of Dante. Not of whatever's coming. He paused. I'm scared of becoming who I used to be. Of proving that the last 3 years were just pretend. Ruth pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Her hands cupped his face, thumbs tracing the hard line of his jaw. Listen to me, she said firmly. The man you used to be wouldn't have admitted that. The man you used to be didn't know how to be scared. He only knew how to be dangerous. She held his gaze. You're not pretending. You're becoming. And becoming isn't finished yet. Benigno stared at her. This woman who had seen him at his lowest and stayed anyway. This woman who had taught him that strength didn't have to mean violence. How do you do that? He asked softly. Do what? Make me believe I can be better than I am. Ruth smiled. That same small certain smile that had hooked him from the first night she'd walked into his office with a mop and refused to tremble. That's what partners do, she said. Now come on. We need to figure out what we're going to say to your brother when he gets here. She took his hand and led him to the living room. They sat on the couch. The same couch where they'd watched movies with Nadia, where they'd fallen asleep tangled together, where they'd built something worth protecting. Outside, the storm clouds had reached the city. Rain began to fall, streaking down the windows in silver lines. Inside, Ruth and Benigno started planning. Because the past was coming for them. And this time Ruth wasn't going to let it win. Marco arrived on a Friday. Ruth insisted on meeting him alone. Benigno fought her on it. 3 separate arguments across 2 days, each one ending the same way. With Ruth standing firm and Benigno pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. You don't know him, Benigno said the night before Marco's arrival. You don't know what he's capable of. You said he was soft. Kind. That was 9 years ago. People change. Ruth leaned against the counter, arms crossed. They do. You're proof of that. Benigno stopped pacing. Looked at her. That's not fair. It's not supposed to be fair. It's supposed to be true. Ruth pushed off from the counter, crossed to him. I need to see him without you there. Without your history shaping the conversation. I need to look him in the eye and decide for myself if he's telling the truth. And if he's not? Then I'll know. And we'll handle it together. Benigno's jaw worked. She could see him wrestling with it, the need to protect warring with the trust he'd learned to give. Finally he exhaled. You call me if anything feels wrong. Anything. I will. Promise me, Ruth. She took his hand. Pressed it to her chest, over her heart. I promise. The coffee shop was in Logan Square, a place called Groundwork that Ruth had chosen specifically. Public. Busy. Neutral territory where neither of them would have an advantage. She arrived 15 minutes early. Ordered a black coffee she didn't intend to drink. Chose a table near the window where she could see the door and the street outside. At exactly 2 o'clock a man walked in. Ruth recognized him immediately, not because he looked like Benigno but because of the way he didn't. Where Benigno was broad and solid, this man was lean. Angular. His hair was dark but threaded with silver at the temples, slightly too long, curling at the collar of his charcoal coat. He had an artist's hands, long fingers, clean nails, the kind of hands that created things instead of destroying them. But his eyes were the same. That same deep black that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. The Onio eyes. He scanned the room. Found her. Hesitated for just a moment. Recognition, assessment, decision, then walked toward her table. Ruth Williams, he said. Not a question. Marco Onio. He sat across from her. Didn't order anything. Just folded his hands on the table and looked at her with an expression that was harder to read than his brother's. Thank you for meeting me, he said. His voice was rougher in person, worn down by years of speaking a different language, living a different life. I know you have no reason to trust me. I don't, Ruth agreed. But I'm here anyway. Marco nodded slowly, accepting the terms. Ruth studied him. The tired lines around his eyes. The way his shoulders curved forward slightly like he was carrying something heavy. The wedding ring on his left hand, simple gold, older than hers, worn thin with time. You're married, she said. Was. Marco glanced at his ring. She passed 3 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. So was I. He didn't elaborate. The grief was there but walled off. Compartmentalized. Her name was Lucia. She was the only person who knew the truth about who I used to be. When she died I thought about coming back then. But I couldn't face Benigno. Couldn't face what I'd left behind. So why now? Marco leaned forward. His voice dropped, though no one around them was paying attention. Because 2 months ago I started receiving photographs. My apartment in Florence. My classroom at the university. My students walking to their cars. His jaw tightened. No notes. No demands. Just images. Someone letting me know they could reach me whenever they wanted. Ruth felt a chill move through her. Dante. I didn't know at first. I thought it might be random. Stalker maybe. Something unconnected to my past. Marco shook his head. But then I started digging. Carefully. Quietly. And I found out what Dante has been doing since Benigno stepped back. Tell me. Marco's eyes met hers. Steady. Serious. Dante Ferraro has spent the last 3 years consolidating power. Not just in Chicago, across the Midwest. He's built alliances with families in Detroit, Milwaukee, Indianapolis. He's expanded operations into areas Benigno never touched. Human trafficking, fentanyl distribution, things that would have been off-limits under the old rules. Ruth's stomach turned. Benigno doesn't know this. Benigno walked away. That was the point, to not know. To let someone else carry the weight. Marco's voice carried no judgment, only understanding. But Dante used that distance. He knew Benigno wouldn't ask questions as long as the legitimate businesses stayed clean. So he built an empire in the shadows while Benigno was building a life with you. Ruth processed this. The scope of it. The betrayal. And now Dante sees Benigno as a threat, she said. As long as Benigno is alive, the old loyalties remain. The men who worked for his father, who respected the Onio name, they remember. Some of them are still loyal. And Dante knows that if Benigno ever decided to come back, those loyalties would shift in a heartbeat. But Benigno isn't coming back. He doesn't want that life. It doesn't matter what Benigno wants. It matters what Dante fears. Marco leaned back. And Dante fears losing control. He's not the type to leave loose ends. Ruth was quiet for a moment. Processing. Calculating. The deal you made, she said finally. 9 years ago. What exactly did you give him? Marco's expression flickered. Guilt. Shame. Old wounds that had never properly healed. Information, he said quietly. Routes. Contacts. Security protocols. Everything I knew about the family's operations and vulnerabilities. He swallowed. I told myself it didn't matter. I was leaving. Benigno was taking over. The information would be outdated within months. But it wasn't. Some of it was. But some of it was the kind of information that doesn't expire. Names. Relationships. Leverage points. Marco's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I gave Dante the blueprint to the family. And he's been using it ever since. Ruth felt anger rise in her chest. Not at Marco exactly, but at the situation. At the past reaching forward to poison the present. Does Benigno know? About what you gave Dante? No. I never told him. I never told anyone. Marco's hands tightened on the table. When I left, I convinced myself it was a clean break. That I could walk away and none of it would follow me. But there's no such thing as a clean break. Not in our world. Ruth looked at him for a long moment. This man who had run from violence and found peace, only to have it shattered. This man who had lost his wife and carried his guilt across an ocean. He wasn't lying. She could feel it. But he wasn't telling her everything either. There's more, she said. Something you're not saying. Marco's eyes widened slightly. Surprise. Then something like respect. Benigno said you were perceptive. Benigno talks about me? Not directly. But I've kept track. From a distance. Marco looked away. I wanted to know he was okay. That leaving hadn't destroyed him completely. It almost did. I know. The words were heavy with regret. And that's why I'm here. To try to fix what I broke. He paused. Gathered himself. You're right. There is more. Ruth waited. The information I gave Dante, it wasn't just about operations. It was about people. Specifically about our mother. Ruth's eyes narrowed. Elena. You've met her. Once. Briefly. She didn't seem pleased about Benigno's choice in wives. A ghost of a smile crossed Marco's face. She wouldn't be. Elena has very specific ideas about family. About legacy. About who belongs and who doesn't. The smile faded. But she's also been playing her own game for decades. Managing relationships, maintaining influence, ensuring the Onio name retained its power even when the operations shifted. What does that have to do with Dante? Marco hesitated. The pause stretched long enough that Ruth knew whatever came next would change things. Our mother knew about the deal I made with Dante. She helped arrange it. Ruth felt the words land like a blow to the chest. What? Elena wanted me gone. I was the heir apparent, but I was weak. Unsuitable. A liability to the family's reputation. Marco's voice was flat now. Reciting facts he'd lived with for years. When I told her I wanted to leave, she didn't argue. She didn't beg me to stay. She connected me with Dante and told me what information to trade for safe passage. She sold out her own son. She removed an obstacle and installed a backup plan. Dante would owe her for facilitating the deal. I would disappear. And Benigno would become what she always wanted him to be. The true heir. Ruth's mind raced. Elena. The elegant old woman in the Gold Coast brownstone. The sharp eyes that had dismissed Ruth with a glance. Does Benigno know? No. And that's part of why I'm here. Marco met her eyes. Because whatever Dante is planning, our mother is connected to it. She may not be controlling him anymore. I don't think anyone controls Dante at this point, but she knows things. And she won't tell Benigno. She'll never admit what she did. But she might tell me. Marco nodded slowly. You're outside the family. You don't play by our rules. You see things we've been trained to miss. Ruth thought about Elena. About the way she'd looked at her, not with hatred but with something colder. Assessment. Calculation. Why should I believe any of this? Ruth asked quietly. You've been gone 9 years. You betrayed your brother. You made a deal with the man who's now trying to kill him. And you're telling me your own mother was involved. She leaned forward. Give me one reason to trust you. Marco was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Slid it across the table. Ruth opened it. Inside was a photograph. 2 boys, maybe 12 and 14. Standing in front of a brownstone that looked like Elena's. The older one, Marco, she realized, had his arm around the younger one's shoulders. Both of them were laughing. Genuine, unguarded joy. The younger boy was Benigno. Before the tattoos. Before the scars. Before the weight of an empire crushed the laughter out of him. I carry that with me everywhere, Marco said quietly. It's the only picture I have of us from before. Before our father started training him. Before I left. Before everything went wrong. Ruth stared at the photograph. At the boy who would become her husband. At the innocence that had been stolen from him piece by piece. I loved my brother, Marco continued. I still do. That's why I ran, because staying would have meant watching him become our father and I couldn't bear it. But running didn't save him. It just left him alone. He reached across the table. Not to touch her, just to rest his hand near hers. An offering. I can't undo what I did. But I can try to protect what he's built. What you've built together. His voice cracked slightly. Let me help. Please. Ruth looked at the photograph. At Marco's weathered face. At the grief and guilt and desperate hope in his eyes. She made her decision. Benigno needs to hear this himself, she said. All of it. The deal. Elena. Everything. He'll hate me. Maybe. Ruth slid the photograph back across the table. But he deserves the truth. And you owe him that much. Marco took the photograph. Held it carefully like it was fragile. Precious. Will you be there? When I tell him. Ruth stood. Picked up her untouched coffee. I'll be there, she said. But Marco, if you're lying to me, if any of this is a trap, I want you to understand something. She leaned down. Met his eyes. Benigno spent 20 years learning how to destroy people. He walked away from that life for me. For our family. Her voice was quiet. Certain. If you hurt him, if you hurt us, I won't need Benigno to handle it. I'll handle it myself. Marco looked at her. And for the first time since he'd walked into the coffee shop, he smiled. A real smile, tired and sad and genuine. He chose well, Marco said. Better than he knows. Ruth straightened. Tomorrow. 6 o'clock. I'll text you the address. She walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. Outside, the February wind cut through her coat. She pulled out her phone and texted Benigno 2 words. Coming home. His response came immediately. I'm here. Ruth started walking. The storm clouds had cleared, but the sky was still gray. Waiting. Tomorrow everything would change. But today she was going home to her husband. To the life they'd built. To the family that was about to get much more complicated. One day at a time. That was still the deal. The reunion happened in their living room. Ruth had considered neutral territory again. A restaurant, a hotel lobby, somewhere public where emotions would be forced to stay contained. But Benigno refused. If my brother wants to talk, he said, he does it in my home. Where I can see him clearly. Where there's nowhere to hide. So at 6 o'clock on a Saturday evening, Marco Onio stood on the brownstone's front steps for the first time in nearly a decade. Ruth watched from the kitchen window as he hesitated at the door. His hand lifted, then dropped. Lifted again. He looked older in the fading light, smaller somehow, like the weight of what he was about to do was physically pressing him down. Nadia was at a friend's house for the night. Ruth had arranged it deliberately. Whatever happened in the next few hours, her daughter didn't need to witness it. The doorbell rang. Benigno didn't move from his position by the fireplace. He stood with his back to the flames, arms crossed over his chest, face carved from stone. He wore a simple black sweater and dark jeans, but his posture was anything but casual. He looked like what he used to be. A man who controlled rooms without speaking, who commanded respect through presence alone. Ruth answered the door. Marco stood on the threshold, that same charcoal coat from the coffee shop, that same weight in his eyes. He held nothing in his hands. Brought nothing with him except the truth he'd been carrying for 9 years. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for letting me come." Ruth stepped aside. "He's in the living room." Marco entered. His footsteps were hesitant on the hardwood floors, his gaze sweeping over the space. The family photographs on the walls, Nadia's rock collection on the custom shelves, the evidence of a life built from scratch. He stopped at the threshold of the living room. Benigno looked at him. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. Ruth positioned herself near the doorway, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to give them space. This wasn't her fight, but she would be there when it ended. "Marco." Benigno's voice was flat, controlled, giving nothing away. "Benigno." Neither of them moved. 9 years stood between them, a chasm filled with abandonment and resentment and grief neither had been able to name. "You look different," Marco said finally. "Softer. You look old." "I am old." Marco attempted a smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "We both are." Benigno uncrossed his arms, took a single step forward. "You left." Not an accusation, just a fact. A wound that had never closed. "I did." No goodbye. No explanation. One day you were there, the next you were gone. Father said you'd run. That you'd abandoned the family. That you were dead to us. Father was right about everything except the order. Marco's voice cracked slightly. "I abandoned the family first. Then I became dead to you." Benigno's jaw tightened. "I looked for you. For months. I hired people, called in favors, traced every lead I could find. And every time I got close you disappeared again. I know. I made sure of it." "Why?" The question hung in the air. Simple. Devastating. Marco took a breath. Then another. Ruth could see him gathering courage, piece by piece, forcing himself to stand when every instinct told him to run. "Because I was afraid," he said. "Of what I would become if I stayed. Of what I would do to survive in that world. Of watching you become father while I stood beside you and pretended it was normal. So you ran." "I ran. And left me to carry everything alone." Marco flinched like he'd been struck. "Yes." Benigno moved closer. His footsteps were silent on the carpet, predator's instincts that never fully disappeared. He stopped 3 feet from his brother, close enough to touch, close enough to hurt. "Do you have any idea what it was like?" His voice was low, dangerous, vibrating with years of suppressed rage. "Father was dying. The organization was fracturing. Everyone was watching to see if I would fail. And you were supposed to be there. You were the one they wanted. The heir. The chosen one. I know. You know nothing." Benigno's control slipped just for a moment. His voice rose, cracked, revealed the wound beneath the anger. "I had to become something I never wanted to be. I had to do things that still wake me up at night. I built walls so high that no one could reach me, and I told myself it was strength when it was just survival." Marco's eyes glistened. "I'm sorry." "Sorry." Benigno laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. "Sorry. 9 years of silence and that's what you bring me. Sorry. What else can I bring? What else do I have?" Marco's voice broke completely. "I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back the years. I can't take away the things you had to become." Tears streamed down his face, unashamed, uncontrolled. "All I have is sorry. It's not enough. It will never be enough. But it's all I have." Ruth watched Benigno's face. Watched the anger war with something older, deeper. The love that had never fully died no matter how hard he'd tried to kill it. "Why are you really here, Marco?" Benigno asked. His voice was quieter now. Exhausted. "After all this time. Why now?" Marco wiped his face with the back of his hand. Straightened his shoulders. Met his brother's eyes. "Because I made a mistake. And that mistake is about to get you killed." The words landed like grenades in the quiet room. Benigno went very still. "Explain." Marco told him everything. The deal with Dante. The information he'd traded for safe passage. The photographs that had started arriving in Florence 2 months ago. The empire Dante had built in the shadows while Benigno looked away. He told him about the surveillance. The threats. The growing certainty that Dante wouldn't stop until the Onio name was erased completely. And then he told him about Elena. Ruth watched Benigno's face as Marco revealed their mother's role. How she'd facilitated the deal, how she'd wanted Marco gone, how she'd been playing her own game for decades. Something shifted in Benigno's expression. The anger drained away, replaced by something colder. Harder. A betrayal so deep it went beyond words. Mother knew, he said quietly. She arranged it. She let me believe you'd abandoned us. Let me hate you for 9 years. And the whole time she was the one who pushed you out. Marco nodded. I'm not excusing what I did. I made the choice to leave. I made the choice to trade information. But Elena, she made it easy. She made it feel like the only option. Benigno turned away. Walked to the window. Stared out at the Chicago skyline, hands braced on the frame. Ruth moved then. Crossed the room to stand beside him. Didn't touch him, just let him know she was there. I should have seen it, Benigno said quietly. All these years. The way she manipulated everything. The way she always had an angle, a backup plan, a piece on the board I didn't know about. She's your mother, Ruth said gently. You weren't supposed to see it. That's not an excuse. No, it's not. But it's the truth. Benigno was silent for a long moment. Then he turned back to face Marco, who still stood in the center of the room, waiting for judgment. The information you gave Dante, Benigno said. How bad is it? Bad enough. Routes and contacts are outdated, but the personal information, relationships, pressure points, family connections, that doesn't expire. Marco swallowed. And there's more. Documents. Records of transactions from father's time. Things that could send both of us to prison if they ever surfaced. And Dante has them. He has copies. The originals were destroyed years ago, but Dante made sure to keep enough to use as leverage. Where does he keep them? A safe in his office. The building on Ashland, the one father used to use for meetings. Benigno nodded slowly. Processing. Planning. You came here to warn me, he said. But you also came here for something else. What is it? Marco hesitated. Glanced at Ruth. Then back at his brother. I want to help fix this. I want to get those documents. Neutralize Dante's leverage. Give you a chance to protect your family without becoming what you used to be. And why should I trust you? The question was brutal in its simplicity. Marco reached into his coat. Pulled out the photograph. The two boys laughing in front of the brownstone, and held it out. Because I still have this, he said. Because I've carried it every day for 9 years. Because no matter how far I ran, I never stopped being your brother. Benigno looked at the photograph. Ruth watched his face. The way his jaw softened, the way his eyes glistened despite his efforts to stay controlled. He took the photograph. Held it carefully like something sacred. I remember this day, he said quietly. We'd just gotten back from the lake. Father was away on business. Mother was, I don't know where. It was just us. Just us, Marco agreed. Before everything else. Benigno stared at the image for a long moment. Then he looked up at his brother. I don't forgive you, he said. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Marco nodded. I understand. But I'm not going to turn you away either. Benigno handed the photograph back. You're here. You want to help. Fine. But if you betray me again, if any of this is a trap. It's not. If it is, Benigno continued, his voice hardening, I won't send someone else to handle it. I'll do it myself. The threat hung in the air. Unchallengeable. Marco met his brother's eyes. If I betray you again, I'll deserve whatever comes. Something passed between them. Not forgiveness, not yet. But acknowledgement. The beginning of a bridge across 9 years of silence. Ruth stepped forward. We need a plan. Dante isn't going to wait forever. Benigno looked at her. The hardness in his face softened just slightly. She's right. He turned back to Marco. You said you wanted to help. Start by telling me everything you know about Dante's operation. Security. Personnel. Weaknesses. Marco nodded. I've been gathering information since the photographs started. It's not complete, but it's a start. Then let's start. Ruth moved toward the kitchen. I'll make coffee. It's going to be a long night. As she passed Benigno, he caught her hand. Squeezed gently. Silent thank you for being there. For holding the space. For making this possible. He squeezed back. Then let go and kept walking. Behind her, she heard the brothers begin to talk. Hesitant at first, awkward with unfamiliarity. But gradually warming. Gradually remembering how to be in the same room. It wasn't fixed. Nothing this broken could be fixed in a single conversation. But it was a beginning. And beginnings, Ruth had learned, were everything. They talked until 2 in the morning. Marco laid out everything he knew, Dante's lieutenants, his security protocols, his habits. The building on Ashland where he kept his office. The safe where the documents were stored. Benigno listened. Asked questions. Made notes in a small leather notebook Ruth had never seen before. It was strange watching him slip back into this mode. The strategist. The planner. The man who had once controlled an empire through careful calculation and controlled violence. But there was something different about it now. A restraint that hadn't existed before. A deliberation that felt less like predator instincts and more like protection. He wasn't planning to destroy Dante. He was planning to neutralize him. To remove the threat without becoming the threat himself. Ruth watched. Participated where she could. Offered observations that both brothers accepted without question. By the time Marco left, with a promise to return the next evening with more information, the sky outside was beginning to lighten. Ruth and Benigno stood in the kitchen, exhaustion weighing on both of them. You should sleep, she said. So should you. I will. But first, she turned to face him fully. How are you doing? Really? Benigno leaned against the counter. Rubbed a hand over his face. I don't know, he admitted. Seeing him again. Hearing everything he said. Learning about Mother. He trailed off. Shook his head. I feel like the ground shifted under my feet. Ruth moved closer. Rested her hand on his chest over his heart. The ground can shift, she said quietly. That doesn't mean we fall. Benigno covered her hand with his. What would I do without you? Lucky for you, you'll never have to find out. He pulled her into his arms. Held her close. Breathed her in. We're going to get through this, he murmured into her hair. Aren't we? Ruth closed her eyes. Felt his heartbeat against her cheek. Steady. Strong. Still here. We are, she said. One day at a time. They stood there in the kitchen wrapped around each other, while the sun rose over Chicago and a new day began. The hardest part was still ahead. But they would face it together. Elena Onio summoned her sons 3 days later. Not invited. Summoned. A handwritten note delivered by a driver Ruth didn't recognize, requesting the presence of both Benigno and Marco at the family brownstone in Gold Coast. Sunday afternoon. 3 o'clock. Non-negotiable. She knows, Marco said when Benigno showed him the note. She knows I'm back. She knows we've been talking. Of course she knows. Benigno set the note on the kitchen table like it was contaminated. Mother has eyes everywhere. She always has. Ruth picked up the note. Read the elegant handwriting, precise, controlled, revealing nothing. She doesn't mention me, she observed. No. She wouldn't. Benigno's jaw tightened. As far as Mother is concerned, you don't exist. Then maybe I should remind her. Both brothers looked at her. I'm coming with you, Ruth said. It wasn't a question. Ruth, Benigno started. No. She set the note down. Met his eyes. Elena has been pulling strings in this family for decades. She helped push Marco out. She let you believe your brother abandoned you. She's connected to Dante somehow, even if we don't know the full extent yet. Ruth crossed her arms. I'm not sitting at home while you walk into her house without backup. She's right, Marco said quietly. Both of them turned to look at him. He shrugged. Ruth sees things we miss. He proved that at the coffee shop. And Mother respects strength. If Ruth stays home, Elena will see it as weakness. If Ruth comes, it changes the dynamic. Benigno was silent for a long moment. Ruth could see him wrestling with it. The protective instinct that never fully went away, warring with the trust he'd learned to give. Finally he exhaled. Fine. But you stay close. And if anything feels wrong, I'll handle it, Ruth said. Same as always. The Gold Coast brownstone looked exactly as Ruth remembered. Elegant, pristine, suffocating. For stories of old money and older secrets. With a wrought iron gate and windows that revealed nothing of what lay inside. They arrived at exactly 3 o'clock. A housekeeper Ruth didn't recognize led them through the marble foyer into a sitting room at the back of the house. High ceilings, antique furniture, fresh flowers on every surface, arranged with military precision. Elena Onio sat in a wingback chair near the window, afternoon light falling across her face like a judgment. She was 78 years old, but her eyes were sharp as broken glass. She wore a cream-colored cashmere sweater and dark slacks, pearls at her throat, silver hair pulled back in an elegant twist. She looked like what she was, a woman who had survived decades in a world designed to destroy women, and had learned to wield power without ever appearing to hold it. Benigno. Her gaze moved to Marco lingered. Marco. How unexpected. Mother. Marco's voice was steady, but Ruth could see the tension in his shoulders. Elena's eyes finally landed on Ruth. The assessment was quick, thorough, dismissive. I see you've brought company. Hi, wife, Benigno said flatly. Ruth. You've met. Briefly. Elena's smile didn't reach her eyes. I wasn't aware she would be joining us. She goes where I go. Benigno guided Ruth to the sofa across from his mother. Marco took the armchair to their left. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of her. Elena's expression flickered. Annoyance, maybe, or recalculation. Then she smoothed it away, returning to perfect composure. Very well. She folded her hands in her lap. I assume Marco has told you about his arrangement with Dante Ferraro. He has. And I assume he's told you about my involvement. Ruth watched Benigno's face. Saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. He has. Elena nodded slowly. No denial. No excuses. Just acknowledgement. Then you understand why I had to do it. No. Benigno's voice was quiet. Dangerous. I don't. Elena sighed. The sound was almost theatrical. A mother disappointed by her children's inability to see the bigger picture. Marco was weak. Your father knew it. I knew it. Everyone knew it. She glanced at Marco without warmth. If he had taken over, the family would have collapsed within a year. The other organizations would have smelled blood. Everything your father built would have been destroyed. So you pushed him out. I facilitated his departure. There's a difference. Elena's voice hardened. Marco wanted to leave. He came to me begging for a way out. I simply provided one. By connecting him with Dante. By letting him trade family secrets for safe passage. By ensuring his exit was clean and the transition to you was seamless. Elena leaned forward slightly. Everything I did for the family. For you, Benigno. To make sure you had the foundation you needed to succeed. Ruth couldn't stay silent any longer. And what about the 9 years he spent believing his brother abandoned him? What about the guilt Marco carried? What about the relationship that was destroyed because you didn't tell either of them the truth? Elena's gaze snapped to Ruth. Processing. Family business is complicated, Mrs. Williams. Perhaps too complicated for outsiders to understand. I understand plenty. Ruth didn't flinch. Didn't look away. I understand that you sacrificed one son to mold another. I understand that you've been playing chess with your children's lives for decades. And I understand that right now, a man named Dante Ferraro is using your arrangement to threaten everything your family built. Silence. Heavy. Charge. Elena's composure cracked. Just slightly, just for a moment. Surprise maybe. Or respect. Ruth couldn't tell. You're direct, Elena said finally. I suppose that's refreshing. I don't have time for games. Neither does your son. Elena turned back to Benigno. Something had shifted in her expression. Calculation replacing dismissal. She's right, Elena admitted. About Dante. He's become problematic. Problematic. Benigno's voice was flat. He's planning to eliminate me and take control of everything. I'd call that more than problematic. I underestimated him. The admission seemed to cost Elena something. Her jaw tightened. When Marco left, Dante was useful. Loyal. Controllable. I thought I could manage him indefinitely. And now. Now he's built something I didn't anticipate. Alliances I wasn't consulted on. Operations I would never have approved. Elena's hands clasped tighter in her lap. He stopped listening to me 2 years ago. Stopped providing information. Stopped pretending to respect the old hierarchy. Marco leaned forward. You knew he was a threat and you didn't warn Benigno? What was I supposed to say? Elena's voice rose, the first crack in her perfect control. That I'd made a mistake? That the man I'd empowered was now beyond my control? That everything I'd done to protect this family might have been the thing that destroyed it? Yes, Benigno said quietly. That's exactly what you should have said. Elena stared at him. For a moment Ruth saw something beneath the armor. Fear maybe. Or regret. Something human. I was trying to fix it, Elena said. Quietly. Without involving you. I thought I could find leverage on Dante, something to bring him back in line. And did you? Elena hesitated. Ruth saw it, the slight pause, the flicker of uncertainty. Mother. Benigno's voice sharpened. What do you know? Elena stood. Walked to a small writing desk near the window. Opened a drawer and removed a manila envelope thick with papers. Dante has been careful, she said, returning to her chair. But not careful enough. I still have contacts. People who remember what they owe the Onio name. She held out the envelope. This is everything I've been able to gather. Financial records. Communications. Evidence of operations that go far beyond what was sanctioned. Benigno took the envelope. Didn't open it. Why are you giving this to me now? Because I can't stop him alone. And because... Elena paused. Her eyes moved to Ruth, then back to Benigno. Because your wife is right. I've been playing chess with my children's lives. And I'm tired of pretending it was for anyone's benefit but my own. The admission hung in the air. Ruth watched Benigno process it. The anger, the hurt, the complicated grief of a son realizing his mother had never been who he thought she was. There's something else, Ruth said. Everyone turned to look at her. You're not surprised Marco is back. You knew he was coming before that note was delivered. Elena's expression flickered. I have sources in Florence. I've been monitoring Marco for years. So you knew about the photographs he was receiving. The threats. I suspected Dante was behind them. I couldn't prove it. And you didn't warn Marco either. Elena stopped. Closed her mouth. For the first time she looked genuinely uncertain. You were waiting, Ruth continued. Waiting to see what would happen. Whether Marco would run again or whether he would come back. You were testing him. Elena didn't deny it. Marco stood abruptly. His face was pale, his hands trembling at his sides. 9 years, he said quietly. 9 years I've been running from what I did. Carrying the guilt of betraying my family. And the whole time you were watching. Waiting. Treating my life like another piece on your board. Marco. No. His voice cracked. You don't get to explain this away. You don't get to make it sound reasonable. He looked at his brother. Benigno. I'm sorry. I need air. He walked out of the room. Ruth heard the front door open and close a moment later. Elena sat very still. Her composure had fully cracked now. She looked every one of her 78 years. Smaller. Older. Alone. I never wanted this, she said quietly. Any of this. Then what did you want? Benigno asked. Elena looked at him. For a moment Ruth saw something behind the armor. A mother who had made choices she couldn't unmake, who had traded love for control and lost both. I wanted my sons to survive, Elena said. In a world that destroys softness I wanted them to be strong. Whatever it cost. It cost everything, Benigno said. It cost Marco his identity. Cost me my brother. It cost us the chance to be a real family instead of pieces in your game. Elena had no response. She sat in her elegant chair, surrounded by her beautiful things and said nothing at all. Ruth stood. Touched Benigno's shoulder. We should go, she said quietly. Marco shouldn't be alone right now. Benigno nodded. He stood still holding the envelope his mother had given him. Thank you for the information, he said. His voice was formal. Distant. If there's anything else you know, anything else that could help us stop Dante, I expect you to share it. I will. And Mother. Benigno paused at the doorway. Don't contact Marco directly. Whatever you need to say to him you say through me first. He's been through enough. Elena nodded. A small, defeated gesture. Ruth and Benigno walked out of the brownstone without looking back. They found Marco sitting on a bench in the small park across the street. He was staring at nothing, shoulders hunched against the cold, hands buried in his coat pockets. Ruth hung back while Benigno approached his brother. Watched from a distance as Benigno sat beside Marco on the bench. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Then Benigno put his hand on Marco's shoulder. A simple gesture. Human. Boo. Marco's composure broke. He bent forward, face in his hands, and wept. Benigno didn't pull away. Didn't speak. Just kept his hand on his brother's shoulder and let him fall apart. Ruth watched from across the path, her eyes burning with unshed tears. This was what Elena had never understood. That strength wasn't the absence of vulnerability. It was the willingness to be present for someone else's. After a long time, Marco straightened, wiped his face, said something Ruth couldn't hear. Benigno responded. Marco nodded. Then both brothers stood and walked toward Ruth. Their shoulders were almost touching, not quite reconciled but closer than they'd been in 9 years. Let's go home, Benigno said when they reached her. Ruth took his hand, looked at Marco. You're coming too, she said. It wasn't a question. You're not spending tonight alone. Marco hesitated, looked at his brother. She's the boss, Benigno said. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. I just live there. For the first time since the coffee shop, Marco laughed. Small, broken, but real. They walked to the car together. 3 people who had no reason to trust each other, bound by something stronger than blood. Family, Ruth thought. The kind you choose. The kind you fight for. The kind that survives. The break-in happened 4 days later. Ruth came home from her shift at 7:15, tired from a 12-hour rotation in the ER, thinking about nothing except a hot shower and the leftover pasta Benigno had promised to save for her. She knew something was wrong before she reached the front door. The lock was intact. The windows were unbroken. Nothing visible from the outside suggested anything had changed. But Ruth had spent 3 years learning to trust her instincts, and right now her instincts were screaming. She paused on the front steps. Texted Benigno. Are you home? His response came immediately. At Marco's. Back in an hour. Everything okay? Ruth stared at the door. Considered waiting for him. Considered calling the police. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out the small canister of pepper spray she'd carried since her days cleaning offices at midnight. Gripped it in her right hand. Turned her key in the lock. The door swung open. Silence. The foyer looked normal. Coat rack undisturbed. Benigno's shoes by the door. Mail stacked on the small table where they always left it. Ruth stepped inside. Closed the door behind her. Listen. Nothing. She moved through the house slowly. Living room, normal. Kitchen, normal. The coffee mug she'd left in the sink that morning was still there, still unwashed, exactly where she'd left it. But something was wrong. She could feel it. She climbed the stairs. Checked the bedrooms. The bathroom. The small office Benigno used for his legitimate business calls. Everything was in place. And that's when she realized what was different. She went back downstairs. Into the living room. Stopped in front of the mantel. The photograph. It was the one from their wedding day. Ruth in a simple cream dress. Benigno in a dark suit. Nadia between them in the yellow dress she'd insisted on wearing. They were laughing at something, all 3 of them, caught mid-joy by a photographer who had cost too much but had been worth every penny. The photograph had been in the center of the mantel, flanked by 2 candles and a small vase of dried flowers. Now it was on the left side. Shifted 6 inches from where it belonged. Ruth's blood went cold. She moved to Nadia's room. Opened the door. The rock collection. The rocks were organized by color. Nadia's system, precise and unchanging. Blue on the left shelf. White in the middle. Gray and brown on the right. Now the blue and white were reversed. Ruth's hands shook as she pulled out her phone. Called Benigno. He answered on the first ring. Ruth? What's wrong? Someone was in the house. Silence. Then, are you sure? The photograph on the mantel was moved. Nadia's rocks are rearranged. Nothing's taken, nothing's broken, but someone was here, Benigno. Someone wanted us to know they could get in. She heard him exhale. Heard the shift in his voice. The return of the man he used to be, cold and calculating and ready for violence. Get out of the house. Go to Mrs. Patterson's. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Benigno. Ruth. Please. Just do this for me. She heard the fear beneath the control. The desperation he was trying to hide. Okay, she said. 15 minutes. She hung up, grabbed her bag, walked out the front door without looking back. Benigno arrived in 12 minutes. He brought Marco with him. Both men moved through the house with a precision that reminded Ruth of soldiers clearing a building, checking corners, testing locks, examining every room for signs of entry. They found nothing. No broken locks. No jimmied windows. No evidence of forced entry anywhere. Professional, Marco said quietly. Someone with skills. And resources. Dante. Benigno's voice was flat. Almost certainly. Ruth sat at the kitchen table watching them work. Nadia was still at her friend's house. Ruth had texted Mrs. Patterson to ask if she could stay another hour. She didn't want her daughter walking into this. This was a message, Ruth said. Both brothers turned to look at her. They didn't take anything. They didn't damage anything. They just touched things. Let us know they were here. They want us scared, Marco agreed. Off balance. Making mistakes. Benigno slammed his palm against the counter. The sound echoed through the kitchen like a gunshot. This is my home. His voice was low, dangerous, vibrating with barely contained rage. My family. And Dante thinks he can just walk in here and... Benigno. Ruth stood, crossed to him, took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. Stop. He was breathing hard. His eyes were wild. The eyes of the man he used to be, the one who solved problems with violence and controlled everything through fear. Look at me, Ruth said firmly. Right now. Look at me. His eyes focused on hers. Slowly the wildness began to recede. This is what he wants, Ruth continued. He wants you angry. He wants you reactive. He wants you to make a mistake that justifies whatever he's planning. He came into our home, Ruth. He touched Nadia's things. I know. And we're going to make him pay for that. But not like this. Not the old way. She held his gaze. You promised me. One day at a time. Different choices. Remember. Benigno's jaw worked. She could see him fighting it. The old instincts, the familiar patterns, the version of himself that knew exactly how to make Dante Ferraro disappear. I remember, he said finally. Then trust me. Trust us. We find another way. Benigno closed his eyes. Pressed his forehead against hers. Another way, he repeated quietly. Another way. Marco watched the exchange without speaking. When Benigno finally stepped back, Marco cleared his throat. Ruth is right. Reacting emotionally is exactly what Dante expects. He's testing us, seeing how we respond, looking for weaknesses. He paused. But we can use this. How? Benigno asked. Dante made a mistake coming here. He thinks he's untouchable, that we're too afraid or too weak to retaliate. That arrogance is a vulnerability. Ruth turned to face Marco. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we stop playing defense. Dante has documents he's using as leverage. As long as he has them, he controls the situation. We need to take them. You said they're in a safe in his office, Benigno said. The building on Ashland. That place is a fortress. I know, I designed the security protocols when father was still alive. Protocols you designed, Marco pointed out. Which means you know the weaknesses. Benigno was quiet for a long moment. Ruth could see him thinking. Running scenarios, calculating risks, weighing options. It's not just the building, he said finally. Dante has people. Loyal people. Men who would die for him, or kill for him without hesitation. So we don't go in guns blazing. We go in quiet. Small team. In and out before anyone knows we were there. And how do you propose we do that? Marco reached into his coat pocket. Pulled out a small USB drive. I've been gathering information since the photographs started. Building layouts. Security schedules. Personnel rotations. He set the drive on the table. It's not complete, but it's a start. Benigno picked up the drive. Turned it over in his hand. This is dangerous, he said. If we get caught. Then we get caught. But at least we went down fighting instead of waiting for Dante to pick us off one by one. Marco's voice hardened. He came into your home, Benigno. He touched your daughter's things. You think that's where it stops? You think he won't escalate? No, Benigno admitted. I don't think that. Ruth stepped forward. Then we need a plan. A real plan. Something that neutralizes Dante without putting ourselves at unnecessary risk. She's right, Marco said. We need more information. We need to know what we're walking into. Benigno looked at the USB drive. Then at his brother. Then at Ruth. There's someone who might be able to help, he said slowly. Someone who knows Dante's operation from the inside. Who? His daughter. Sofia Ferraro. Ruth remembered the name from Marco's briefing. You said she distanced herself from her father's world years ago. She did. Works as a social worker on the south side now. Hasn't spoken to Dante in over 3 years. Benigno set the USB drive on the table. But she still has access. She's still his daughter. And she hates what he's become. You think she'll help us? I think she might listen. If the right person asks. His eyes moved to Ruth. Someone who isn't connected to our world. Someone who can approach her without triggering every alarm. Ruth understood what he was asking. You want me to talk to her? You connected with Marco when I couldn't. You saw through Elena when we were both too close. Benigno took her hand. You see people, Ruth. Really see them. Sofia is going to be suspicious of anyone connected to the Onio name. But you. I'm an outsider. You're the most honest person I know. And right now that's what we need. Ruth considered it. The risk. The potential reward. The weight of being the one to make this work or fail. I'll do it, she said. But I need everything you have on her first. Background. Habits. Where she works, where she lives, what she cares about. Done. And Benigno? Ruth squeezed his hand. Whatever I find out, we decide together. No lone wolf moves. No going behind each other's backs. Agreed. Marco nodded. I'll keep working on the building layouts. See if I can find any gaps in the security we can exploit. And I'll reach out to some of my old contacts, Benigno said. Quietly. See if anyone's willing to talk about what Dante's been doing. Ruth looked at both of them. These two brothers, broken and rebuilding, working together for the first time in a decade. We have 3 days, she said. Nadia's spring break ends on Monday. I don't want her anywhere near this when things get moving. 3 days, Benigno agreed. Ruth picked up her bag. Looked at the kitchen. Their kitchen in their home where an intruder had walked freely just hours ago. I'm going to pick up Nadia, she said. And then we're going to have dinner like a normal family. Because that's what we are. And I'm not letting Dante Ferraro take that away from us. Ruth found Sofia Ferraro on a Tuesday afternoon. The community center in Englewood was a converted church. Red brick, stained glass windows. A hand-painted sign that read, Southside Youth Alliance in faded blue letters. The neighborhood around it was rough, blocks of boarded-up buildings and empty lots. But the center itself felt alive. Kids on the front steps, music playing from somewhere inside, laughter echoing through open windows. Ruth parked across the street. Watched for a few minutes. She'd called in sick to the hospital for the first time in 2 years. Told Benigno she was running errands. Both lies but necessary ones. This conversation needed to happen without pressure, without expectation, without anyone looking over her shoulder. At 2:15 Sofia emerged from the front door. She was smaller than Ruth expected. Maybe 5'4", with dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and circles under her eyes that spoke of too many late nights and not enough help. She wore jeans, a northwestern sweatshirt and sneakers that had seen better days. She looked exhausted. She looked determined. She looked like someone Ruth understood. Sofia sat on the front steps, pulled a sandwich from a paper bag and started eating. Alone. Watching the street with the careful attention of someone who'd learned early that safety was never guaranteed. Ruth got out of the car. She crossed the street slowly, giving Sofia time to notice her approach. Non-threatening. Unhurried. Just a woman walking toward another woman on a Tuesday afternoon. Sofia looked up when Ruth reached the steps. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Assessment, calculation, the instincts of someone who'd grown up in a dangerous world. Can I help you? Ruth stopped at the bottom of the steps. Kept her hands visible, her posture open. Sofia Ferraro? The name landed like a stone. Sofia's expression hardened. I don't go by that name anymore. I know. I'm sorry. But I need to talk to you about your father. Sofia stood. Her sandwich fell to the steps, forgotten. I don't have a father. Not anymore. And whatever you're selling, I'm not buying. She turned toward the door. He broke into my home, Ruth said quietly. Touched my daughter's things. Let us know he could reach us whenever he wanted. Sophia stopped. Her hand rested on the door handle but she didn't push it open. My husband is Benigno Onio. Sophia turned around slowly. Her face was pale now, her eyes wide with something Ruth recognized. Fear. And understanding. You're Ruth, Sophia said. I've heard about you. From who? People talk. Even when they think no one's listening. Sophia descended the steps slowly, stopping 2 feet from Ruth. You're the woman who changed him. The janitor who didn't run. Ruth nodded. And you're the daughter who walked away. Who built something different. I tried to. So did we. But your father won't let us. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Ruth could see her thinking. Weighing risks, calculating angles, deciding how much to trust the stranger who had appeared on her doorstep. Why are you here? Sophia asked finally. What do you want from me? Ruth made a choice. The same choice she'd made with Marco, with Elena, with every person in this complicated web of family and blood and betrayal. She told the truth. Your father has documents. Records that he's using as leverage against my husband and his brother. As long as he has them, he controls the situation. He can threaten us, hurt us, destroy everything we've built. Ruth paused. I'm here because I think you might know how to help us get those documents. And because I think you hate what your father has become as much as we do. Sophia's expression flickered. Pain. Old wounds that had never healed. You're asking me to betray my own father. I'm asking you to protect innocent people from a man who's already crossed lines that can't be uncrossed. Ruth stepped closer. I have a daughter, Sophia. She's 15. Her name is Nadia. She collects rocks from Lake Michigan and argues about hot chocolate and finally feels safe for the first time in her life. Her voice cracked slightly. Your father came into our home. He touched her things. He wanted us to know that safety was an illusion. Sophia's eyes glistened. She turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. I know what he is, she said quietly. I've always known. Even when I was a child, I knew something was wrong. The way people looked at him. The way they were afraid. She paused. My mother tried to protect me from it. She built walls around our little world, pretended we were just a normal family. But you can't pretend forever. What happened to her? Sophia was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. She found something she wasn't supposed to find. Records. Evidence of things my father had done. Terrible things even by his standards. Another pause. She confronted him. Told him she was going to leave, take me with her, go to the authorities. Ruth felt a chill move through her chest. And she died 3 weeks later. Heart attack, they said. She was 42 years old and had no history of heart problems. Sophia turned to face Ruth. Her eyes were dry, but the grief was there, ancient and permanent. I was 23. Old enough to understand what had happened. Old enough to know I couldn't prove anything. Old enough to know that staying would destroy me. So you left. I ran. Changed my name. Built a life as far from him as I could get. Sophia gestured at the community center behind her. This is what I do now. I help kids who come from broken homes, dangerous neighborhoods, families that hurt them. As I understand. Because I was them. Ruth saw it then, the same determination she saw in herself. The same refusal to let the past define the future. The same stubborn hope that something better was possible. You're not your father, Ruth said quietly. No. I'm not. Sophia's voice hardened. But I'm also not naive. If I help you, if my father finds out, he'll come for me. He's let me exist because I stay quiet, because I don't interfere. If I cross that line, we'll protect you. How? You can't even protect yourselves. He broke into your home, Ruth. He walked right in and let you know he could do it again whenever he wanted. Sophia shook her head. My father is not a man who forgives. He's not a man who forgets. And he's not a man who loses. Then help us make sure he loses this time. Sophia stared at her. The silence stretched between them, long enough for Ruth to hear her own heartbeat, loud enough to drown out the sounds of the neighborhood around them. What do you need? Sophia asked finally. Ruth felt something release in her chest. Relief. Hope. The beginning of a plan. Information. Anything you know about his security, his routines, his weaknesses. She paused. And the documents he's holding. Do you know where they are? I know where he keeps everything important. A safe in his office. The building on Ashland, the one my grandfather used to own. Sophia's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. The combination changes monthly, but the pattern doesn't. It's always based on dates that mattered to him. My mother's birthday. My birthday. His anniversary. You know the current combination? I can figure it out. I know how he thinks. Sophia's jaw tightened. I spent my whole childhood learning to predict him. To stay out of his way. To survive. Ruth nodded slowly. If we do this, if we get those documents, your father loses his leverage. He can't threaten us anymore. And then what? You think he'll just accept defeat? Walk away and let you live in peace? No. I think we take the documents to the right people. Federal contacts. People who've been building cases against him for years but never had enough evidence. Ruth paused. We don't just take his leverage. We give him something to worry about. Something that keeps him too busy to come after us. Sophia considered this. Ruth could see her working through the implications. The risks, the rewards, the potential consequences. There's more, Sophia said finally. Things I haven't told anyone. Things I found after my mother died when I was going through her papers. What kind of things? Evidence. Not just of my father's operations but of his partners. Other families. Politicians. People who've been protected for decades because they're connected to men like him. Sophia's voice dropped. My mother hid copies before she died. I don't know if she knew she was going to be killed or if she just wanted insurance. But she left them for me. Told me where to find them in a letter she'd written years before. Ruth's breath caught. You have evidence that could bring down more than just your father. I have evidence that could shake the foundations of organized crime in the Midwest. But I've never used it. Because I was afraid. Because I didn't know who to trust. Because I thought staying quiet would keep me safe. And now. Sophia looked at the community center behind her. At the kids on the steps, the music playing through the windows, the life she'd built from the wreckage of her childhood. Now I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of watching people like my father destroy families and communities and lives, while the rest of us just try to survive. She turned back to Ruth. If we do this, if we really do this, we don't just take down my father. We take down everyone connected to him. And we give the authorities everything they need to make it stick. Ruth felt the weight of what Sophia was offering. The scope of it. The danger. That's a big move, she said carefully. A lot of powerful people will want to stop us. That's why we have to be smart. We have to be careful. And we have to be fast. Sophia reached into her pocket, pulled out a worn business card. Wrote something on the back. This is my number. Personal cell. Only 3 people in the world have it. Ruth took the card. Looked at the handwritten digits. Give me 48 hours, Sophia said. I need to gather my mother's files. Figure out the current combination to my father's safe. Put together a timeline of his movements. She paused. And Ruth. Yes. Don't tell your husband about my mother's evidence. Not yet. The more people who know, the more risk there is of a leak. Sophia's eyes were serious. I trust you. I don't know the others yet. Ruth understood. This woman had spent her entire life learning to protect herself from people who were supposed to love her. Trust didn't come easily. 48 hours, Ruth agreed. And Sophia? Yes. Thank you. For listening. For believing this could work. Sophia smiled, small, tired but real. My mother used to say that sometimes the only way out is through. I think she'd be proud of what we're about to do. Her smile faded. I just hope she'd forgive me for taking so long. Ruth reached out. Squeezed Sophia's hand gently. I think she already has. They stood there for a moment. 2 women from different worlds, connected by the men who had shaped their lives and the determination to build something better. Then Ruth let go. Step back. 48 hours, she repeated. 48 hours. Ruth walked back to her car. Got in. Sat there for a long moment, staring at the business card in her hand. This was bigger than she'd realized. Bigger than Benigno's safety. Bigger than their family's future. This was the chance to dismantle something rotten at its core. And Ruth Williams, who had once been invisible, who had once been no one, was going to be the one to make it happen. She started the car. pulled away from the curb. The clock was ticking. Ruth didn't sleep that night. She lay beside Benigno, listening to his breathing, watching the shadows move across the ceiling. Her mind kept circling back to Sophia's words, to the evidence hidden somewhere in the city, to the weight of what they were about to attempt. She hadn't told Benigno about Sophia's mother, about the files, about the scope of what could happen if everything worked. It was the first secret she'd kept from him since they'd started this. It felt wrong. Heavy. Like a stone lodged in her chest. But Sophia had asked for trust. And Ruth understood, better than most, what it meant to protect yourself from people who had already failed you once. 48 hours. He would give Sophia that time. And then together they would decide what came next. The next morning Ruth went through the motions. Made breakfast. Kissed Nadia goodbye as she left for school. Sat across from Benigno at the kitchen table and pretended that everything was normal. "You're quiet," Benigno said. Ruth looked up from her untouched coffee. "Just tired." "You've been tired a lot lately." "It's been a tiring few weeks." He studied her, that careful, patient gaze that saw more than she wanted it to. The gaze that had learned to read her the way she'd once learned to read him. "Ruth." She set down her mug. Met his eyes. "I'm working on something," she said carefully. "Something that could help us. But I can't tell you all of it yet." Benigno's expression didn't change. But she saw the tension gather in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You're keeping secrets from me. I'm protecting a source. Someone who needs time to trust that we won't get her killed." "Her?" "Yes." Benigno was quiet for a long moment. Ruth watched him process, the old instincts warring with the new ones, the need to control fighting against the trust he'd learned to give. "Sophia Ferraro," he said finally. Ruth didn't confirm or deny. He didn't need to. "You found her. You talked to her." Benigno leaned back in his chair. "And she told you something that you're not ready to share." "She told me something that could change everything. But she asked for time. And I'm giving it to her. 48 hours. Ruth blinked. "How did you?" "Because that's what I would ask for. Time to gather resources. Time to prepare. Time to make sure the trust is real before committing to something that can't be undone." Benigno reached across the table. Took her hand. "I don't like secrets between us. You know that." "I know. But I also know you wouldn't keep something from me unless you believed it was necessary." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "So I'm going to trust you. The way you've trusted me over and over, even when I didn't deserve it." Ruth felt her eyes burn. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let the tears fall. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just promise me that when the 48 hours are up, you'll tell me everything." "I promise." Benigno squeezed her hand. Then released it. Stood up. "I'm meeting Marco this afternoon. Going over the building layouts one more time." He paused at the kitchen doorway. "Whatever you're working on, whatever Sophia told you, I hope it's worth the risk." "It is," Ruth said. "I think it really is." He nodded. Then he was gone, footsteps fading up the stairs. Ruth sat alone at the kitchen table, her cold coffee in front of her, the weight of secrets pressing down on her shoulders. 36 hours left. That afternoon Ruth went to the hospital. Not for her shift, she wasn't scheduled until Thursday. But she needed to move, to think, to be somewhere that felt normal while she waited for Sophia's call. She found herself in the chapel on the 3rd floor. A small room with wooden pews and soft lighting and a stained glass window that cast colored shadows across the floor. Non-denominational. Open to everyone. Ruth had never been particularly religious. Her grandmother had taken her to church as a child, but the habit had faded over the years, replaced by a practical faith in hard work and survival. But today she needed something. A moment of stillness. A space to breathe. She sat in the back pew. Closed her eyes. What am I doing? The question circled through her mind like a bird that couldn't find a place to land. She was a nurse. A mother. A wife. She cleaned up messes and healed wounds and made sure dinner was on the table. She was not equipped for this. For crime families and hidden evidence and plans that could bring down empires. And yet, she thought about Nadia's rock collection, rearranged by a stranger's hands. About Benigno's face when he realized his mother had betrayed him. About Marco's tears on the bench outside Elena's brownstone. She thought about Sophia, who had lost her mother and spent 8 years hiding from her father. About the evidence that could change everything, locked away because one woman had been too afraid to use it. Fear had kept Sophia silent. Fear had kept Marco running. Fear had shaped every decision Elena ever made. Ruth was tired of fear. She opened her eyes, looked at the stained glass window, Mary holding the infant Jesus, light streaming through the colored glass like a promise. I don't know if you're listening, she thought. I don't know if anyone's listening. But if you are, help me get this right. Help me protect the people I love. She sat there for a long time, until the colored light shifted across the floor, until her breathing slowed and the weight in her chest felt a little lighter. Then she stood, walked out of the chapel, checked her phone. One message from Sophia. I have what we need. Can you meet tonight? Ruth typed her response without hesitation. Where and when? They met at 9 o'clock. Sophia had chosen the location. A 24-hour diner on the west side, far from the neighborhoods that either of them usually frequented. Neutral territory. Anonymous. Ruth arrived first. Ordered coffee. Watched the door. Sophia came in at 9:15, a worn leather messenger bag slung across her shoulder. She looked different than she had at the community center. More alert, more focused, the exhaustion replaced by something sharper. She slid into the booth across from Ruth. Set the bag on the seat beside her. I found everything, she said without preamble. My mother's files. She was more thorough than I realized. How thorough? Sophia reached into the bag, pulled out a thick manila envelope worn at the edges, marked with a date from 8 years ago. Bank records. Wire transfers. Communications between my father and people you wouldn't believe. Politicians, judges, police commissioners. Names that would make national headlines if they ever got out. She paused. And documentation of specific operations. Dates. Locations. Victims. Ruth felt the weight of what she was looking at. The scope of it. Your mother gathered all of this? She was smart. Careful. She knew who my father was and she knew that someday she might need protection. Or leverage. Sophia's voice caught slightly. She didn't get to use it. But she made sure I could. Ruth reached out. Covered Sophia's hand with her own. I'm sorry. For what you've been through. For what you've had to carry alone. Sophia's eyes glistened. She blinked rapidly, forcing the emotion back. Thank you. But right now we need to focus. She pulled her hand away gently. There's something else. The combination to my father's safe. I figured it out. Already. Like I said, I know how he thinks. The current combination is based on the date my mother died. Sophia's jaw tightened. He's sentimental in the worst possible way. Ruth absorbed this. The cruelty of it. The twisted possessiveness of a man who would use his wife's death date to protect his secrets. So we have the combination. We have your mother's evidence. What else do we need? Sophia pulled a second item from her bag. A small USB drive, identical to the one Marco had shown them days ago. This is a copy of my father's security protocols. Updated as of last month. I have a contact who still works in his organization. Someone who owes me and who hates what my father has become almost as much as I do. You trust them. I trust that they want out. And I trust that helping us is their best chance at getting it. Ruth turned the USB drive over in her hand. The weight of it was deceptive. So small, so ordinary, but holding information that could mean the difference between success and catastrophe. There's one more thing, Sophia said. The timing. What about it? My father is leaving town this weekend. Business in Detroit. A meeting with one of his partners. He'll be gone Friday night through Sunday afternoon. Sophia leaned forward. That's our window. 48 hours when the building will be running on a skeleton crew. 48 hours when we have the best chance of getting in and out without being noticed. Ruth did the math. Today was Wednesday. That gave them 2 days to prepare. We need to tell Benigno and Marco, she said. I know. That's why I wanted to talk to you first. Sophia's eyes were serious. You know them better than I do. You know what they're capable of, and what they're likely to do when they find out the full scope of what we're planning. Ruth understood. Benigno's protective instincts. Marco's guilt-driven need to prove himself. Both of them were capable of making decisions that could jeopardize everything. I'll handle them, Ruth said. But I need you to trust me on how I do it. What do you mean? I mean, we tell them what they need to know when they need to know it. We don't dump everything on them at once and let them spin out. Ruth paused. Benigno has spent 20 years learning to respond to threats with force. He's been working hard to be different, but old patterns don't disappear overnight. If we tell him about your mother's evidence before he's ready to process it, he might do something rash. He might. And we can't afford rash right now. We need precision, timing, control. Sophia nodded slowly. So what do you suggest? Ruth thought for a moment, arranging the pieces in her mind. Tonight I tell Benigno about the safe combination and the security protocols. That's actionable information, things he and Marco can use to finalize the plan. And my mother's evidence? I hold on to that until we're inside the building. Until we have the documents from the safe. Ruth met Sophia's eyes. Then I tell them everything. And we decide together what to do next. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Considering. You're asking me to trust you with evidence that could get both of us killed if it falls into the wrong hands. I'm asking you to trust that I want the same thing you do. To protect our families. To stop your father. To build something better from the wreckage. Sophia studied her. That same assessing gaze she'd shown at the community center. Looking for the lie, looking for the angle. She didn't find one. Okay, Sophia said finally. She pushed the envelope across the table. But I'm coming with you. Friday night. When you go into that building. Ruth blinked. That's not non-negotiable. Sophia's voice was firm. This is my father we're taking down. My mother's evidence. My life on the line. She paused. I've spent 8 years hiding from this. I'm done hiding. Ruth recognized the look in Sophia's eyes. The same determination she saw in the mirror every morning. The same stubborn refusal to be a bystander in her own story. It's dangerous, Ruth said. I know. You could get hurt. Or worse. I know that too. Ruth was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. Hey. Friday night. We go together. Sophia's shoulders relaxed slightly. Relief maybe. Or acceptance. Thank you. For trusting me. Thank you for being brave enough to come forward. They sat there for a moment. Two women from different worlds, bound together by the men who had shaped their lives and the determination to shape their own futures instead. Then Ruth picked up the envelope. The USB drive. Tucked both into her bag. I should get home, she said. Benigno will be waiting. Tell him what you need to tell him. I'll be ready when you call. Ruth stood. Paused. Sophia. Yes. Your mother would be proud of you. I hope you know that. Sophia's eyes glistened again. But this time she didn't blink the tears away. She let them fall. I hope so too. Ruth walked out of the diner into the cold Chicago night. The envelope was heavy in her bag. The USB drive was small but significant. 2 days until everything changed. She got in her car. Started driving home. In the rearview mirror she saw Sophia watching from the diner window. A small figure, backlit by fluorescent light, standing at the beginning of something she couldn't undo. Ruth understood. Better than most. Some decisions once made could never be unmade. You just had to make sure they were the right ones. Ruth told Benigno everything that night. Almost everything. She told him about the safe combination. About the security protocols on the USB drive. About Sophia's contact inside Dante's organization. About the window, Friday night through Sunday afternoon, when Dante would be in Detroit and the building would be vulnerable. She did not tell him about Sophia's mother. About the evidence that could bring down half the power structure in the Midwest. About the envelope hidden in the back of her closet, behind the winter coats she never wore. That would come later. When they were inside. When there was no turning back. Benigno listened without interrupting. His face was unreadable, that careful mask he wore when he was processing something dangerous. When the old instincts were fighting for control. When she finished he was quiet for a long moment. They sat in the living room, the same room where Marco had fallen apart 3 days ago, where the photograph had been moved by an intruder's hands. The house was silent around them. Nadia was asleep upstairs, unaware of the plans being made below. Friday night, Benigno said finally. Yes. That's 2 days. I know. Not much time to prepare. It's the only window we have. When Dante gets back from Detroit, who knows what he'll do. The break-in was a warning. The next move could be worse. Benigno nodded slowly. His hands were clasped between his knees, fingers interlaced, knuckles white with tension. Sophia is coming with us. It wasn't a question. Ruth had expected him to fight her on this, to insist that civilians stay behind, that the danger was too great, that he couldn't protect everyone if things went wrong. But he didn't argue. He just looked at her with something like resignation. She needs to be there, Ruth said. It's her father. Her choice. And you? Do you need to be there too? Ruth met his eyes. Yes. Why? Because I started this. I found Sophia. I convinced her to trust us. I can't send you into that building and wait at home like some. She stopped. Started again. I'm not a bystander, Benigno. I never have been. You knew that when you married me. I knew you were stubborn. I didn't know you had a death wish. It's not a death wish. It's a refusal to let fear make my decisions. Benigno's jaw tightened. She could see him wrestling with it, the need to protect her warring against the respect he'd learned to give. If something happens to you, then you'll raise Nadia. And you'll tell her that her mother fought for what mattered. That she didn't hide when things got hard. Ruth reached out, took his hands in hers. But nothing is going to happen. We're going to be smart. Careful. In and out before anyone knows we were there. You sound very confident. I am confident. Because I have you. And Marco. And Sophia. She squeezed his hands. We're not alone in this, Benigno. That's the difference between now and before. You don't have to carry everything yourself anymore. Something shifted in his expression. The tension didn't disappear, but it changed, became something softer. More like surrender than defeat. One day at a time, he said quietly. One day at a time. He pulled her close. Wrapped his arms around her. Held her like he was afraid she might disappear. I love you, he murmured into her hair. You know that, right? Whatever happens Friday night, you know that. I know. Ruth pressed her face against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I love you too. That's why we're doing this. To protect what we have. They held each other for a long time. Until the tension drained from his shoulders. Until her breathing matched his. Until the fear became something manageable, not gone but contained. Then Benigno pulled back. Met her eyes. We need to talk to Marco. Finalize the plan. Tomorrow morning. Tonight we rest. Can you rest? Knowing what's coming. Ruth smiled, small, tired but real. I can try. They didn't rest. They lay in bed together, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around them. Ruth's mind kept spinning through scenarios. What could go wrong, what could go right, what she would do if everything fell apart. At 2 a.m, Benigno's voice broke the silence. Tell me about your grandmother. Ruth turned her head. Looked at him in the darkness. What? Your grandmother. The one who came up from Mississippi. You mentioned her once at the beginning. But you never talk about her. Ruth was quiet for a moment. The question was unexpected. A reach for connection in the middle of uncertainty. A reminder that they were more than just soldiers preparing for battle. Her name was Josephine, Ruth said finally. But everyone called her Josie. She was born in 1932 in a town called Greenwood. Cotton country. Jim Crow country. How did she end up in Chicago? The Great Migration. She was 16 when she left. Took a bus north with $20 in her pocket and an address for a cousin who'd moved to the South Side 3 years before. Ruth paused. She never saw Mississippi again. Never went back? Said there was nothing to go back to. Her parents were dead. Her brothers had scattered. The only thing left was the land that had never belonged to them anyway. Ruth's voice softened. She used to say that Chicago was cold in a different way than Mississippi. The weather was harsh, but people's eyes were less likely to kill you. Benigno was quiet for a moment. Then, she sounds strong. She was. She got a job cleaning houses in Hyde Park when she was 18. Same family for 30 years. Raised my mother in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. Never complained. Never stopped working. Ruth felt her eyes burn. She died when I was 12. Heart gave out. Too many years of too much work and too little rest. I'm sorry. She used to tell me that survival wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about being the most stubborn. Ruth laughed softly. She'd say, "Baby girl, this world wants to grind you down. But you don't let it. You keep standing. You keep moving. You keep showing up, day after day until they get tired of trying to stop you." Benigno reached out, found her hand in the darkness, laced his fingers through hers. "She sounds like someone I would have respected. She would have terrified you. Probably." He was quiet for a moment. "My grandfather was like that. The one who came from Sicily. He didn't talk much about the old country, said the past was for people who didn't have a future. But he taught me things. How to read people. How to wait. How to know when to strike and when to hold back." "He sounds like a survivor too." "He was. Different kind of survival than your grandmother. Darker. More blood on his hands." Benigno paused. "But I think he would have understood her. They came from different worlds but they knew the same truth." "What truth?" "That the only thing you can really control is yourself. Your choices. Your actions. Everything else is just weather. You prepare for it as best you can but you can't stop it from coming." Ruth turned onto her side. Faced him in the darkness. "Are you scared?" "About Friday?" "Yes." "What scares you most?" Benigno was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Losing you. Losing what we have. Becoming what I used to be because it's the only way to protect you." He paused. "I'm scared that I'll make a choice in that building that I can't undo. That I'll prove everyone right, that I was never really different. Just pretending." Ruth reached out, cupped his face in her hands, felt the stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin. "You're not pretending. You're becoming. Remember." "I remember. And whatever happens Friday night, whatever choices you have to make, I'll be there. Right beside you. We face it together." "Together," he repeated. She leaned in, pressed her lips to his. Soft. A promise more than a kiss. When she pulled back, his eyes were glistening. "Try to sleep," she said. "We have a lot to do tomorrow." "I'll try." Neither of them slept. But they lay there together, hands intertwined, drawing strength from each other's presence. And when the sun rose on Thursday morning, they got up to face what was coming. Thursday was chaos. Marco arrived at 8. They spread maps and blueprints across the kitchen table, going over every detail of the building on Ashland. Entry points, security cameras, guard rotations, the location of Dante's office on the 3rd floor, the safe behind the painting of his grandfather. Sophia joined them at noon. She was tense, focused, all business. She walked through the security protocols on the USB drive, explaining the gaps her contact had identified. Shift changes that created 30-second windows. Cameras that had blind spots. Doors that could be bypassed with the right tools. Ruth watched the three of them work. Benigno in command mode, Marco following his lead, Sophia providing intel with clinical precision. It was strange seeing them function as a team. Three people who should have been enemies, bound together by circumstance and necessity. By evening they had a plan. Entry through the service entrance on the west side of the building. Up the back stairs to the 3rd floor. Into Dante's office using Sophia's knowledge of the security codes. Open the safe. Retrieve the documents. Out the same way they came in. Simple. Clean. Dangerous. "What about weapons?" Marco asked. "No guns," Benigno said. "We're not going in to fight. We're going in to extract. If things go wrong, we abort and regroup." "And if we can't abort?" Benigno's jaw tightened. "Then we improvise. But the goal is to avoid confrontation entirely. We're ghost. In and out without leaving a trace." Sophia nodded. "The skeleton crew on Friday nights is minimal. 4 guards rotating in pairs. If we time it right, we shouldn't encounter anyone. And if we do, then I talk us out of it." Sophia's voice was flat. "Half of Dante's people knew me when I was a kid. Some of them still feel guilty about what happened to my mother. If we get caught, I play the grieving daughter card. Distract them long enough for you to get clear." "That's a lot of risk for you," Ruth said. "It's my risk to take." Sophia met her eyes. "I've been hiding for 8 years. I'm done being afraid of my own father." Ruth nodded. He understood. Better than anyone. "What about Nadia?" Benigno asked, turning to Ruth. "Who's watching her tomorrow night?" "Mrs. Patterson. I told her we have a work event downtown. She's keeping Nadia overnight." Does Nadia know anything? She knows something is going on. She's too smart not to notice. Ruth paused. But she doesn't know what. And she doesn't need to. Benigno was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded. Hey. We meet here tomorrow at 9 p.m. Dress dark. Minimal gear. Leave your phones in the car. We don't need anyone tracking our location. What about communication? Marco asked. Earpieces. Short range. Sophia's contact provided them. Benigno reached into a bag on the counter, pulled out 4 small devices. Channel 3. Keep chatter minimal. Ruth took one of the earpieces. Turned it over in her hand. Such a small thing. So ordinary. And yet it represented everything that was about to change. Any questions? Benigno asked. Silence. Then get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be long. Marco and Sophia left separately. Ruth watched them go from the kitchen window. Marco walking toward his apartment in Pilsen, Sophia getting into a modest sedan parked down the block. 2 people broken by the same world choosing to fight back. Ruth felt something like hope bloom in her chest. Then Benigno's arms wrapped around her from behind. His chin rested on her shoulder, his breath warm against her neck. You're thinking, he said. Always. About tomorrow? About everything. She leaned back into him. About how we got here. About who we used to be. About who we're becoming. And Ruth turned in his arms. Faced him. And I'm ready. Whatever tomorrow brings, I'm ready to face it with you. Benigno's eyes softened. He pulled her closer. Pressed his forehead to hers. One day at a time. One day at a time. They stood there in the kitchen wrapped around each other as the last light of Thursday faded outside the window. Tomorrow would come. The plan would unfold. Everything would change. But tonight they had this. Each other. The quiet certainty of love tested by fire and proven real. And that was enough. Friday night came too fast. Ruth spent the day moving through her routine like a ghost. Made breakfast. Drove Nadia to Mrs. Patterson's. Kissed her daughter goodbye and tried not to hold on too long. Mom. Nadia's voice was suspicious. You're being weird. I'm being a mother. That's my job. You're being extra. Like something's wrong. Ruth looked at her daughter, 15 now, sharp as a blade with eyes that missed nothing. So much like her grandmother. So much like Ruth herself. Nothing's wrong, Ruth said. I just love you. That's all. Nadia studied her for a long moment. Then she wrapped her arms around Ruth and squeezed. I love you too, Mom. Be careful tonight. It's just a work thing. Sure it is. Nadia pulled back. Smiled. That knowing smile that said she understood more than she was supposed to, but she was choosing to trust her mother anyway. Ruth watched her walk into Mrs. Patterson's apartment. Watched the door close behind her. Then she got in her car and drove home to prepare for war. They gathered at 9 o'clock. Benigno wore all black, dark jeans, black sweater, black jacket. His head was freshly shaved, gleaming under the kitchen lights. He looked like what he used to be, dangerous, controlled, ready for anything. Marco was dressed similarly, but there was something different in his posture tonight. The guilt that had weighed him down for days was gone, replaced by something harder. Purpose maybe. Or resignation. Sophia arrived last. She wore dark clothes and a determined expression, her hair pulled back tight, her mother's envelope tucked into a messenger bag across her chest. Ruth had changed into black jeans and a dark gray sweater. Her nursing shoes, quiet, comfortable, made for long hours on her feet. Her wedding ring hidden in her pocket, because she didn't want to lose it if things went wrong. They stood in the kitchen, the 4 of them looking at each other in the harsh overhead light. Everyone clear on the plan? Benigno asked. Nods all around. Communication check. They fitted the earpieces. Tested the connection. 4 voices, crackling but clear, bound together by technology and desperation. We go in quiet. We stay quiet. We get what we came for and we get out. Benigno's eyes moved from face to face. If anything goes wrong, if anyone encounters resistance, you abort and get clear. We regroup here. No heroes. Understood. Understood, Marco said. Understood, Sophia echoed. Ruth just nodded. She didn't trust her voice. Benigno looked at her. Something passed between them. Fear, love, determination. All the things they couldn't say out loud. Let's go. The building on Ashland looked different at night. During the day it was just another brick structure in a neighborhood full of them. A converted warehouse, 3 stories, narrow windows, nothing remarkable from the outside. At night it became something else. Shadows pooled in the doorways. The few windows that showed light were barred. The street around it was empty, cleared by reputation rather than force. They parked 2 blocks away. Approached on foot, staying in shadows, moving with the practiced silence of people who understood what was at stake. Sophia led them to the service entrance on the west side. A metal door, rusted at the edges, illuminated by a single flickering bulb. Security code changes monthly, she whispered. But the pattern doesn't. She punched in 6 digits. The lock clicked. The door swung open. They slipped inside. The corridor was dark, lit only by emergency exit signs casting red shadows across concrete walls. The air smelled like dust and industrial cleaner and something underneath that Ruth couldn't name. Something old. Something wrong. They moved single file. Sophia first, then Benigno, then Ruth, then Marco bringing up the rear. Their footsteps were silent on the concrete floor. Their breathing was controlled, measured, invisible. Up 1 flight of stairs. Then another. The 3rd floor opened before them. A hallway lined with doors, all closed, all dark except for one at the far end. Dante's office. Sophia held up a hand. Everyone stopped. Guard rotation in 2 minutes, she breathed. We wait. They pressed against the wall. Ruth could hear her own heartbeat, loud as a drum in her ears. She could feel Benigno beside her, coiled and ready, every muscle tensed for action. Footsteps echoed from somewhere below them. 2 sets. Moving away. Sophia counted under her breath. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Now. They moved. Dante's office door was heavy oak, out of place in the industrial corridor. Sophia punched in another code. The lock clicked. They slipped inside. The office was larger than Ruth expected. Expensive furniture. Persian rugs. A massive desk facing floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. On the wall behind the desk, a painting. An old man in a dark suit, his eyes following them across the room. Dante's grandfather. The man who had started all of this. The safe is behind the painting, Sophia whispered. Hidden panel. You have to lift the frame to access it. Benigno moved to the painting. His hands found the hidden catches. The frame swung open, revealing a steel safe embedded in the wall. Combination, he said. Sophia moved beside him. Her fingers trembled as she entered the numbers. The date of her mother's death twisted into a tool of protection. The safe clicked open. Inside folders. Dozens of them. Organized by date, by name, by operation. The records of Dante Ferraro's entire empire, laid out in meticulous detail. Start grabbing, Benigno said. Everything you can carry. They worked quickly. Folders disappeared into bags, into pockets, into every available space. Ruth's hands moved automatically, grabbing documents without reading them, trusting that they would matter later. 2 minutes passed. 3. That's enough, Marco said. We need to go. Ruth reached for one more folder, thick, labeled with a date from 3 years ago. Her hand closed around it just as the door opened behind them. Light flooded the room. A man stood in the doorway. Heavy-set. 50s. Smile that didn't reach his eyes. Dante Ferraro. Well, he said. This is unexpected. Time stopped. Ruth's hand was still on the folder. Benigno had turned, positioning himself between Dante and the others. Marco was frozen by the safe. Sophia stood rigid, her face drained of color. Dante stepped into the room. 2 men flanked him, large, silent, hands resting on weapons at their belts. I thought you'd be in Detroit, Benigno said. His voice was calm, controlled, giving nothing away. I was supposed to be, but something felt wrong. A good leader learns to trust his instincts. Dante's eyes moved across the room, cataloging everything. Sophia. I wondered when you'd finally work up the courage. Father. Sophia's voice was steady, but Ruth could see her hands trembling. I'm not here to talk. No, I suppose you're not. You're here to steal from me. To betray your own blood. Dante's smile widened. Your mother would be so disappointed. Something snapped in Sophia's expression. The fear transformed into rage. Don't you dare talk about her. Don't you ever. Enough. Benigno's voice cut through the room. This is between you and me, Dante. Let the others go. Let them go. Dante laughed. Benigno, you always were too soft. That's why you stepped back. That's why you let yourself believe you could just walk away. He shook his head. There is no walking away. Not from this life. Not from me. I don't want your life anymore. I just want to protect my family. Your family. Dante's eyes found Ruth. Lingered. The janitor. The one who cleaned your office and somehow convinced you that you could be someone different. His smile turned cruel. She's pretty. I understand the attraction. But she's made you weak, Benigno. Soft. Vulnerable. Ruth met his gaze. Didn't flinch. Didn't look away. I'm not the vulnerable one here, she said quietly. Dante's smile flickered. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise maybe. Or reassessment. She speaks. And with conviction no less. He took a step closer. Tell me, Mrs. Onio, do you know what your husband used to do for a living? The things he ordered? The blood on his hands. I know everything. And you stayed anyway. I stayed because I believe people can change. Because I've seen it happen. Ruth's voice was steady. Can you say the same? Dante's smile disappeared entirely. For a moment his mask slipped, revealing the cold, calculating predator beneath. I've never needed to change. I've always been exactly what this world required. He gestured to his men. Take the bags. All of them. The guards moved forward. Wait. Sophia's voice stopped them. She reached into her messenger bag. Pulled out the envelope, her mother's evidence. Before you do anything you need to see this. Dante's eyes narrowed. What is that? Mom's insurance policy. Everything she gathered before you killed her. Bank records. Communications. Evidence of operations that go far beyond this room. Sophia's voice cracked, but she held firm. She knew who you were. And she made sure that someday someone would be able to stop you. Silence. Dante's face went pale. For the first time Ruth saw fear in his eyes. You're bluffing. Am I? Sophia pulled a single paper from the envelope. Held it up. Recognize this? Wire transfer from 2015. $3 million to a judge in Cook County. The same judge who dismissed charges against your associate 2 months later. Dante's jaw tightened. This is just one page, Sophia continued. There are hundreds more. Names. Dates. Amounts. Enough to bring down everyone connected to you. Politicians, police, other families. She paused. Copies are already with federal contacts. If anything happens to us tonight, this goes public tomorrow morning. Ruth watched Dante process this. Watched him calculate the odds, weigh the risks, search for a way out. You're lying, he said. But his voice was uncertain now. My mother didn't raise a liar. She raised a survivor. Sophia's eyes burned. Let us go. Let us walk out of here with what we came for. And maybe, I don't destroy everything you've built. The room was silent. The guards waited for orders. Benigno stood ready, every muscle coiled for action. Marco was pressed against the wall, barely breathing. Ruth watched Dante's face. Watched the war playing out behind his eyes. Then slowly something shifted. The predator retreated. The businessman emerged. You'd really do it, Dante said quietly. Burn it all down. Your own family's legacy. You killed my mother. You threatened innocent people. You broke into homes and terrorized families. Sophia's voice was cold. You stopped being my family a long time ago. Dante stared at her for a long moment. Then he laughed, a short bitter sound. She really was your mother. That same stubborn fire. That same willingness to destroy everything for the sake of principle. He shook his head. Take your papers. Take whatever you want. But know this. If that evidence ever sees the light of day, I will find you. All of you. And I will. You won't do anything. Benigno stepped forward. Because the evidence is already in motion. Because every move you make from this point forward will be watched. Because you're not the only one with contacts, Dante. And mine have been waiting years for an excuse to bring you in. Dante's eyes widened. You wouldn't. I already have. The files go to the FBI Monday morning. Unless you disappear. Leave Chicago. Leave the country. Start over somewhere far away from everyone you've ever hurt. You're exiling me. I'm giving you a choice, which is more than you ever gave anyone else. Silence stretched between them. Two men who had once been allies, now enemies, negotiating terms in a room full of secrets. Finally, Dante exhaled. The fight drained out of him, replaced by something Ruth didn't expect. Defeat. I underestimated you, Dante said quietly. Both of you. His eyes moved to Ruth. Especially you. Ruth said nothing. There was nothing to say. Dante waved a hand. His guard stepped back. Go. Take your papers. Take your evidence. Take whatever victory you think you've won. His voice was tired now. But remember this, Benigno, you may have beaten me tonight. But you can't escape what you are. What we are. The blood runs too deep. Maybe, Benigno said. But I'm willing to spend the rest of my life trying. He took Ruth's hand, nodded to Marco and Sophia. They walked out of the office, down the stairs, through the service entrance, into the cold Chicago night. No one followed them. They made it back to the brownstone at midnight. The bags were emptied on the kitchen table. Documents spread across every surface. Evidence of crimes spanning decades, waiting to be sorted and delivered. No one spoke for a long time. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by exhaustion and something else. Relief, maybe. Or disbelief. Finally, Sophia broke the silence. It's over. Not quite, Benigno said. We still need to deliver the evidence. Make sure Dante actually leaves. Tie up loose ends. But the worst part is over. Sophia looked around the room, at the documents, at the people who had helped her face her father. I never thought I'd be able to do this. To stand in front of him and not fall apart. You were strong, Ruth said. Your mother would be proud. Sophia's eyes glistened. I hope so. Marco cleared his throat. What happens now? With the evidence? With Dante? We let the system do its work, Benigno said. The FBI gets the files. The investigation proceeds. Dante either runs or faces consequences. He paused. Either way, he's done. He can't threaten us anymore. And your mother? Marco asked. Elena. Benigno was quiet for a moment. She made her choices. She can live with them. But I'm done letting her manipulate this family. Marco nodded slowly. Something had shifted between the brothers. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acceptance. A willingness to move forward instead of back. Ruth reached for Benigno's hand. Laced her fingers through his. It's late, she said. We should rest. The hard work starts tomorrow. Tomorrow, Benigno agreed. Sophia and Marco left together, walking toward their cars in comfortable silence. Ruth watched them go from the kitchen window, two broken people beginning to heal. Then Benigno's arms wrapped around her from behind. We did it, he murmured. We did. You did it. The plan. Sophia. All of it. We did it together. That's how it works now. He turned her in his arms, cupped her face in his hands, looked at her like she was the first real thing he'd seen in years. I love you, he said. Have I mentioned that lately? Once or twice. Ruth smiled. But I don't mind hearing it again. He kissed her. Slow. Full of everything they'd survived and everything that lay ahead. When he pulled back, his eyes were soft. Let's go to bed. Tomorrow's going to be long. Tomorrow, Ruth agreed. They walked upstairs together, hands intertwined, leaving the documents spread across the kitchen table. There would be time for logistics later. For phone calls and meetings and the careful work of dismantling an empire. But tonight they had earned this. Peace. Safety. Each other. Ruth fell asleep with Benigno's arms around her and the sound of his heartbeat steady against her ear. And for the first time in weeks she didn't dream of storms. The weeks that followed moved slowly. Ruth delivered Sophia's evidence to federal contacts on Monday morning. A meeting arranged through Benigno's old network, people who had been waiting years for exactly this kind of opportunity. The agent who received the files was a woman named Patricia Hendricks, mid-50s, with gray streaking through her dark hair and eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. She flipped through the pages without expression, asked clarifying questions, made notes in a small leather notebook. When Ruth finished explaining, Hendricks looked up. You understand what this means, she said. If we move forward with this, lives will change. Not just Dante Ferraro's, everyone connected to him. Politicians, judges, business leaders. The ripple effects will be significant. I understand. And you're prepared for the attention that might come your way? The scrutiny? The potential danger? Ruth thought about Nadia. About Benigno. About the life they'd built from nothing. I've been preparing for this my whole life, she said. I just didn't know it until now. Hendrik studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. We'll be in touch. Dante Ferraro left Chicago 3 days later. Ruth didn't know the details, didn't want to know. But Benigno told her that Dante had liquidated his assets, transferred control of his operations to associates who would face their own reckonings soon enough, and boarded a private plane to somewhere in South America. He's gone, Benigno said that night. They sat on the back porch watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Really gone. Do you believe it? I believe he's smart enough to know when he's beaten. And I believe the FBI made it very clear what would happen if he ever set foot in this country again. Ruth leaned against his shoulder. What about his people? The ones who stayed behind. Some of them will cooperate with the investigation. Others will scatter. The organization is fractured. It'll take years for anyone to rebuild what he had. Benigno paused. If they even try. And Elena? The question hung between them. Heavy with everything it contained. She's been quiet, Benigno said finally. Marco went to see her yesterday. Said she looked smaller, older, like the fight had gone out of her. Do you think she'll face consequences? For her part in all this? Probably not. She was careful, always careful. Her fingerprints aren't on anything that matters. Benigno's jaw tightened. But she knows what she did. She knows that her sons know. And she'll have to live with that for whatever time she has left. Ruth considered this. The punishment of isolation. The weight of family bonds severed by choice. Is that enough for you? Benigno was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired. It has to be. I spent 20 years learning that vengeance doesn't heal anything. It just creates more wounds. He turned to look at her. I want to break the cycle. For Nadia. For us. For whatever comes next. Ruth reached up. Touched his face. Felt the familiar roughness of his jaw, the warmth of his skin. That's the man I married, she said softly. He smiled. That small, uncertain smile she'd fallen in love with years ago. I'm still learning how to be him. We all are. That's what becoming means. Spring arrived with unexpected warmth. The brownstone filled with light, curtains thrown open, windows cracked to let in fresh air, the smell of blooming trees drifting through the rooms. Nadia's rock collection caught the sun, casting colored shadows across her bedroom walls. Ruth finished her nursing degree in May. The graduation ceremony was small. A community college gymnasium, folding chairs, a stage decorated with paper streamers. But Benigno was there in the front row, beaming like she'd won the Nobel Prize. Nadia sat beside him holding a handmade sign that read, "That's my in glittery letters. Marco came too. He sat a few rows back, quieter now, still healing but present. Still showing up. And Sophia. She slipped in at the last minute, took a seat near the back and caught Ruth's eye just before the ceremony began. A small nod. A smile. The acknowledgement of everything they'd survived together. When Ruth walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she thought about her grandmother. About Josephine Williams, who had come north with $20 and an address, who had cleaned houses for 30 years, who had taught Ruth that survival wasn't about strength. It was about stubbornness. I did it, Grandma, she thought. I kept standing. I kept moving. I kept showing up. Somewhere she hoped Josephine was proud. Summer brought changes. Marco rented an apartment in Pilsen. A small place, nothing fancy but his own. He started teaching art classes at a community center 3 blocks from Sophia's. Watercolors for seniors. Sketching for at-risk youth. The kind of quiet work that didn't make headlines but changed lives anyway. He came to Sunday dinners now. Sat at the kitchen table with Nadia and argued about art and music and whether deep dish pizza was really pizza or just a casserole in denial. It's a casserole, Nadia insisted. Anyone with taste buds knows that. You're a child. You don't understand tradition. I understand that New York slice is superior in every way. She's been corrupted, Marco said to Ruth. This is a tragedy. Ruth laughed. The kind of laugh that came from somewhere deep, somewhere that had been locked away for years. She has opinions. I consider that a success. Benigno watched from the doorway, a dish towel over his shoulder, something soft in his expression. He caught Ruth's eye, smiled. This was what they'd fought for. This ordinary, imperfect, beautiful chaos. This was home. Elena came to dinner once. Just once. It was Ruth's idea. She'd seen the way Benigno looked when Marco mentioned their mother. The complicated grief, the unresolved anger, the part of him that still wanted things to be different. She's still your mother, Ruth said one night. That doesn't mean you have to forgive her. But maybe you need to say goodbye. To who you thought she was. To the relationship you wanted but never had. Benigno was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. One dinner. That's all I can offer. That's enough. Elena arrived at 6 o'clock on a Saturday evening. She wore a cream-colored dress and pearls, her silver hair perfectly styled, her posture rigid with the effort of being present. Dinner was awkward. Conversations stilted. Nadia filled the silences with chatter about school and friends and the boy named Deshawn who still smelled like Axe body spray but was apparently less annoying now. Elena listened. Asked occasional questions. Complimented Ruth's cooking with the kind of formal politeness that revealed how uncomfortable she was. After dessert, Elena asked to speak with Benigno alone. They went to the living room while Ruth washed dishes and Nadia retreated to her room. Ruth didn't know what they said to each other. She didn't ask. But when Benigno returned to the kitchen an hour later, his eyes were red. His jaw was tight. And something in his posture had shifted. Not healed exactly but lighter. Released. She's leaving, he said. Going to live with a cousin in Arizona. Says the Chicago winters are too hard for her now. Is that true? Probably not. But it's a way out that lets her keep her dignity. He leaned against the counter. She apologized. Not for everything, not even for most of it. But for not telling me about Marco. For letting me hate him all those years. That's something. It's not enough. But it's what she's capable of giving. He looked at Ruth. I told her I loved her. Because I do. And I told her I didn't trust her. Because I don't. And I told her that I hoped she found peace in Arizona. Because I mean that too. Ruth crossed to him. Took his face in her hands. That was brave. It didn't feel brave. It felt like letting go of something I'd been carrying for too long. That's what bravery is sometimes. Not the big moments. Just the willingness to release what's been hurting you. Benigno pulled her close. Held her tight. Thank you, he murmured into her hair. For pushing me to do this. For being here. Always. They stood there in the kitchen wrapped around each other while the evening light faded outside. Elena left Chicago 2 weeks later. She didn't say goodbye. But she sent a card on Nadia's birthday. And on Ruth's. And on Benigno's. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was something. A thread, thin and fragile, connecting them across the distance. And sometimes Ruth thought that was enough. Fall came with its familiar rhythms. Ruth started her new job at Northwestern Memorial. Pediatric nursing, the department she'd dreamed about since she first enrolled. Long shifts. Difficult cases. Moments of joy so profound they brought tears to her eyes. Benigno continued running the legitimate businesses, but with less intensity now. He delegated more. Came home earlier. Started cooking dinner on weeknights instead of ordering takeout. You're getting domestic, Ruth teased him one evening. I'm getting old. There's a difference. You're 45. Exactly. Ancient. Nadia rolled her eyes from her spot at the kitchen island. You're both ridiculous. We're in love, Ruth said. That's what it looks like. Gross. But she was smiling when she said it. On a quiet evening in October, Ruth and Benigno sat on the back porch. The city hummed in the distance. String lights glowed softly above them. The air was cool, hinting at winter but not cold enough to drive them inside. Ruth held a cup of tea in her hands, warming her fingers. Benigno sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. I've been thinking, he said. Dangerous. Very. He smiled. Then sobered. I've been thinking about everything that happened. The past year. My mother. All of it. And I realized something. I spent most of my life trying to control everything. Every outcome. every relationship, every potential threat. He paused. I thought that was strength. I thought that was what it meant to protect the people I loved. And now I understand that control was just fear wearing a different mask. I was so afraid of losing everything that I couldn't hold on to anything. He turned to look at her. Until you. Ruth set down her tea. Gave him her full attention. You taught me that love isn't about control. It's about trust. About showing up, day after day, even when you're scared. Even when you don't have all the answers. His voice cracked slightly. You taught me that I could be someone different. Someone better. And I don't know if I've ever properly thanked you for that. You thank me every day. By being here. By trying. By choosing different even when it's hard. That's not enough. It's everything, Benigno. Ruth took his hand. When I walked into your office with that mop, I was invisible. I was nobody. I was just trying to survive day after day without expecting anything more. She squeezed his fingers. You saw me. Really saw me. Not as someone to use or control, but as a person worth knowing. Worth loving. You were always worth that. Maybe. But I didn't know it. Not until you showed me. They sat in silence for a moment. The weight of everything they'd shared. The struggles, the fears, the small victories, settling between them like a foundation. I have something for you, Benigno said. He reached into his pocket. Pulled out a small velvet box. Ruth's breath caught. Benigno. It's not what you think. We're already married. I'm not proposing again. He smiled. Although I would. Every day if you'd let me. He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Not her wedding band which she still wore, but something different. A thin gold band with a small diamond, old and worn and beautiful. This was my grandmother's, he said. The one who came from Sicily. He gave it to my grandfather when they got engaged. He wore it every day until he died. Benigno's voice was thick. I've been holding on to it for years, waiting for, I don't know, the right moment. The right person. Ruth's eyes burned. Benigno. I want you to have it. Not as a replacement for your wedding ring. But as a symbol. Of the family we've built. Of the man I'm still becoming. He paused. Of everything I owe you. Ruth took the ring. Turned it over in her hands. Such a small thing. So fragile. So precious. She slipped it onto her right hand. It fit perfectly. Thank you, she whispered. Benigno pulled her close. Pressed his lips to her forehead. Held her like she was the most important thing in the world. Thank you, he said. For staying. For believing. For showing me what love is supposed to look like. They sat there on the porch, wrapped around each other as the night deepened around them. In the kitchen the lights were on. Nadia was doing homework at the table, music playing softly from her phone. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary evening in an ordinary home. But there was nothing ordinary about it. This was what they'd built. What they'd fought for. What they'd almost lost and then reclaimed, piece by piece, day by day. This was love. Real love. The kind that survived storms and emerged stronger. Ruth closed her eyes. Felt Benigno's heartbeat against her cheek. One day at a time. That had been their promise from the beginning. And they would keep it, for as long as they both lived. Some stories end with fireworks. Grand declarations. Moments that shake the earth and change everything in an instant. This story ended quietly. With a woman and a man sitting on a porch, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. With a daughter inside, growing up strong and safe and loved. With an uncle who visited on Sundays and a grandmother who sent cards from Arizona. With a network of people, broken and healing, learning to trust each other again. Ruth Williams had walked into Benigno Onio's office with a mop and a bucket and no expectations. She had seen a man drowning in his own power and she hadn't looked away. She hadn't run. She had stayed. And in staying she had changed everything. Not with grand gestures or dramatic confrontations. But with daily choices. Small acts of courage. The stubborn refusal to give up on someone who had given up on himself. That was the lesson if there was one. That love wasn't a feeling, it was a practice. A discipline. A choice you made over and over even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Benigno had spent his life believing that strength meant control. Ruth had shown him a different kind of strength. The kind that came from vulnerability, from trust, from letting someone else see the broken parts and loving them anyway. And together they had built something that couldn't be broken. Not by Dante Ferraro. Not by Elena's manipulation. Not by the past reaching forward to poison the present. They had built a family. A home. A future. And that was enough. That was everything. Thanks for staying with me through both parts of Ruth and Benigno's story. It took us through some dark places, but it ended where it should. With hope, with family, with the quiet kind of love that doesn't need to be loud. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, which moment hit you the hardest? Part 1 or Part 2? I'd love to know. Until next time, take care of yourselves.